I become a Mecha. I can evolve infinitely. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 51, The Fourth Line of Defense. September 13th. Over the Sunset Sea. The second support formation, the Black Sky transport ship, approaching the silent airspace, about to descend. A pilot on the ship reported the situation while pulling the lever in his hand down. The black transport ship sank into the clouds like a diving whale. Does your new Mecha have a name? Yuzaro sent a message to Beiying in the private channel. He was not thinking about this all the time, but he was a little nervous when he thought about jumping directly from the transport ship in a while. Although he had become a steel body, he was still a little uncomfortable with the idea of a tough guy falling from the sky, so he could only talk to Beiying to divert his attention. No. Beiying's thoughts had just come out of last night, and she was not very good at naming things, so this matter had not been settled. I'll give you my Mecha information, or you can call her by her code name. As soon as the voice fell, Yuzaro received a package data from Beiying's body, and it was immediately entered into Yuzaro's system. Mecha code, Manuscript 03, Model, Experimental First Generation Manuscript Mecha, Driver, Beiying, Mecha Performance, 4th Generation Dual Core Power Armor, Height 77 meters, Weight 11,200 tons Equipment. Module, Deep Trace Bionic Interaction System, Flame High Frequency Hot Cutting Sword, X1 Full Joint Turbine Power Acceleration Device, Pupa Liquid Steel Memory Armor, Firefly Microcluster Missile, Combat Rating, C, 7,500 points. Although Yuzaro knew that the experimental Mecha was definitely stronger than the 3rd generation Mecha in service, he didn't expect the combat rating gap between the two to be 2,000 points. He had heard that Omega had a lot of cutting-edge technology, but due to funding and applicability issues, most of these cutting-edge technologies could not be installed on the 3rd generation Mecha. Installing these technologies would either significantly extend the manufacturing period of the Mecha, or the funds required to apply these technologies would be enough to empty the entire budget of the Alliance. Looking at the exaggerated technology of Manuscript 03, Yuzaro suspected that, even if the paint of this Mecha was wiped off, it would cause the Black Sky to disintegrate on the spot. Did Dr. Yuan mention the maintenance and compensation issues when he lent us the Mecha? Yuzaro was very worried that, if Manuscript 03 broke down, Black Sky would directly give it to Omega as collateral. She said, don't worry about these issues, just use it boldly. Beiying certainly couldn't guess what Yuzaro was thinking. She said that mechas should go to the battlefield, otherwise what's the point of lying in the hangar? Yuzaro didn't know what to say for a while. Let Beiying drive the Mecha boldly. Yuan Zhen, you are really not afraid of Omega going bankrupt? System warning. The energy radar detection range is limited, information transmission is disturbed, and only short-range communication is allowed. The sudden alarm interrupted the conversation between Yuzaro and Beiying, and the entire transport ship also encountered severe turbulence at this time. When the fleet completely broke through the clouds, a hellish scene appeared in front of everyone. The billowing black smoke that kept gathering and separating rushed straight into the sky. Scarlet magma gushed out from the mountain, passed with a thunderous roar. Red boulders rolled down from the top of the mountain to the foot of the mountain. Countless ashes flew in the air. Boom. Red sparks streaked across the black smoke, leaving a spider web-like tail flame. Mount Duahu is erupting. How is this possible? The people on the bridge couldn't believe what they saw. This dormant volcano standing between the archipelago has not been activated for nearly 3 centuries, and until the United Front base was attacked, the local detectors did not sound any alarms. But now, this volcano has turned the land within a radius of 100 miles into scorched earth. The transport ship's air purification system is turned on, and all personnel must wear filter masks before landing. The captain immediately gave the order. Warning, large energy fluctuations detected, energy level 5 this time. It was a system on crossing Shan that sounded the alarm. Roar. A roar that resounded through the sky echoed in the sky. What's that sound? The captain looked for the source of the sound in surprise. Rumble. At this moment, a giant pillar of fire with a diameter of 300 meters suddenly rose from the restless crater and broke through the thick clouds. Get out of the way. Burning fireballs rained down on the fleet. Energy defense position has been activated. Power supply priority has been adjusted. Current shield value 100%. When the blue position wrapped around the huge transport ship, two huge fireballs hit the shield at the same time. Gravel and magma splashed in front of everyone, and the shock caused by the impact set off layers of ripples on the honeycomb-like shield. Current shield value 92%. Bang bang bang. Flames exploded on the ship's shield one after another, and the billowing smoke and unpredictable eruptions made it impossible for the entire fleet to rise in altitude. How long will it take to pass through this airspace? The captain's tone was very anxious, and his brows were completely twisted into two twists. It is estimated to be 3 minutes and 24 seconds, sir. Boom. Another fireball hit the top of the ship. Current shield value 61%. In the dimly lit temporary hangar, Xingshan's body was shaking with the vibration of the ship. There is a very dangerous monster near the volcano. Uzio was sure that the long roar just now was clearly made by the monster, but I didn't find it. Beiying believed Xingshan's words, but no matter how she scanned the area below, she couldn't find any trace of the monster. Uzio actually encountered the same situation. The whole land was a sea of fire and scorched earth except for a constantly erupting volcano, without any signs of life. Where on earth? The two mechas were in trouble at the same time. On the bridge, everyone's face was extremely solemn, because they were facing a fatal problem. Current shield value 33%. Commander, do we still need to detour? The pilot of the spaceship was sweating. The captain did not answer this question immediately. Because the fourth line of defense islands could not be detected, the entire fleet was traveling according to the scheduled route without expecting the eruption of Mount Duayu, and now the fleet was too close to the eruption site. Unable to increase altitude, and with the shield about to break, they had only two choices. First, go at full speed in a straight line and drive out of the danger zone quickly despite the eruption. Second, change the course and take a detour to a place with less jet density, but this would delay the time it takes for the fleet to leave the danger zone. After hesitating for 3 seconds, the captain finally gave the order with great determination. Full speed ahead. Chapter 52, Flying over the volcano. Almost at the same time as the captain gave the order, the restless crater once again roared through the sky. The red pillar of fire shuttled between the black clouds and finally exploded when it reached the top, attacking the entire fleet like a rainstorm. The transport ship encountered the worst situation. Current shield value 17%. Looking at the magma and rubble bursting out of the blue light, everyone's heart almost sank to the bottom. In addition to the black sky, the transport ships of other legions also faced the same dilemma. Nearly 3/4 of the ships chose to take a long detour. Although doing so would make the ship stay in the danger zone longer, it would also allow the shield launcher to support longer. The remaining quarter rarely went straight ahead at full speed like the black sky, and most of them would turn to fly along the maximum radius of the high-risk zone. At the same time, in the temporary hangar of the transport ship, Xingshan's energy radar also issued a rapid prompt sound, which proved that he was quite close to the monster. Bang! Another huge fireball hit the crumbling shield. This time, the cracked honeycomb shield could no longer hold on, and shattered on the spot like a cracked eggshell. System warning. The energy defense field has disappeared, and the estimated recovery time is 2 hours, 12 minutes and 31 seconds. The hull is about to be impacted. Please go to the nearest safe cabin, and prepare to escape. The shrill alarm echoed throughout the transport ship. Except for the staff on the bridge, everyone ran to the nearest safe cabin and tied the fasteners to themselves as quickly as possible. Once the ship was seriously damaged, these people would immediately parachute out from the nearest emergency exit. Boom, boom, boom. Several fireballs with black smoke fell along the arc on the transport ship that had lost its shield and instantly smashed several large holes in the armor covering the surface of the spacecraft. At the same time, Xingshan had to hold onto the parking rack tightly to prevent the fuselage from shaking during the impact. The transport ship has reached the closest place to the crater. Is it in the crater? Yuzaro looked at the huge red dot on the energy radar in disbelief. But at this moment, Yuzaro clearly heard the sound of the engine on the left side of the transport ship exploding. System warning. The L1 engine has been damaged, the flight speed has dropped by 25%, and the hull balance is being adjusted. How long will it take to leave the jet center area? At this time, the captain had already sat in the central seat and fastened the fastener. Once the transport ship faced the fate of destruction, he could temporarily concentrate all control authority on himself, so that others in the control room would have a chance to escape the ship. 1 minute and 16 seconds, sir. Hearing the answer, the captain couldn't help but pinch the armrest of the seat hard. The armor of the transport ship couldn't hold out for this period of time. Everyone in the command room, listen to my orders. Everyone leave your seats immediately and go to the nearest safe cabin, ready to abandon the ship at any time. Before the captain finished speaking this sentence, he had already recovered all operating permissions and took over the entire ship alone. Regardless of whether the people in the control room wanted to stay or not, they had now lost the power to live and die with the ship, so they could only obey the captain's orders and leave the huge bridge to him alone. However, at this moment, the captain suddenly received a prompt from the system. System warning. Hangar number 1 has been manually opened. That's Xingshan's hangar. The captain's pupils suddenly shrank. Bang. Xingshan chopped the giant axe into the armor of the hull and slowly climbed to the top of the transport ship's surface like climbing a rock. What are you doing, Xingshan? Go back to the hangar quickly, or you will fall. The captain couldn't understand Xingshan's actions at all, but all he could do now was to dissuade him. Staying in the hangar won't save the ship. Ensure that the ship moves forward steadily, and leave the rest to me. As soon as the voice fell, the captain felt a huge monster on top of the hull. It seems that we have to get serious. At this time, Xingshan was already standing on the top of the ship with a giant axe in his hand, looking at the doomsday scene in front of him. The hot air was tearing Xingshan's armor crazily under the high-speed movement of the transport ship. Bright yellow sparks were flying in the air like snowflakes, and the rising and expanding smoke swept past the side of the ship, trying to swallow up the entire scarlet sky. Swoosh! A silver metal chainsword like a snake and scorpion emerged from Xingshan's armor and entangled the black axe handle. Xingshan's abdomen also began to deform, revealing the dragon-riding gorilla turret group hidden under the armor. One red frame after another locked the rain of fire that was about to hit the ship. Yuzaro could even calculate their flight speed and trajectory through the system. Parameter calculation completed. Dynamic calibration mode turned on. Target locked. Waiting for your command. Fire. In an instant, 8 heavy machine guns roared at the same time, and dozens of bright flames penetrated the falling boulders, breaking them into countless scattered fragments. The machine guns that continued to fire moved freely on the chain device without stopping for a moment. The hot giant metal shells rolled out of the ejection window with white smoke. They only stayed on the surface of the ship for 1 second, before being blown off the ship by the whistling airflow. The power furnace on Xingshan's chest had turned from dark red to red at this time, continuously delivering surging power to Xingshan's hands. The next second, Xingshan threw the black giant axe in his hand directly out. A huge fireball was pierced by the giant axe on the spot and disintegrated into debris in the air. Swoosh! Just as the giant axe was about to continue flying forward, Crossing Shan suddenly grabbed the chainsword wrapped around the axe handle and twisted the flight trajectory of the giant axe. The black giant axe crossed a semicircle in the air and smashed another fireball. Time passed by minute. The dancing giant axe tore the air, and the rotating machine gun poured out firepower. The two played in harmony and continued to resist the incoming rain of fire. Finally, when Crossing Shan's machine gun group's ammunition chain was about to reach the bottom, the transport ship successfully broke through the central eruption area. Yuzao turned around and looked at the rain of fire that was left behind the ship, and there was an unspeakable depression in his heart. He saw two Vanguard-class transport ships being engulfed by the rising flames, and people kept jumping out of the ship during the fall. But only hell greeted them. Charred wasteland, flowing magma, rain of fire that fell from the top of the head at some point, and air filled with toxic substances. In the distance, several transport ships with their indicator lights on barely managed to keep their energy shields, and the flashing blue light was as precarious as a star about to go out. The Black Sky became the first legion to pass through the eruption zone, but it also lost contact with other troops. However, just when everyone on the transport ship thought they had escaped, the system sounded the alarm again. System warning. The ship has been detected to be locked by the tracking system. 7 missiles drag comet-like tails from the ground to attack the transport ship. Chapter 53. Isolated and helpless. Uzio aimed the turret group at the incoming tracking missiles almost immediately after the alarm sounded. However, the limited vertical adjustment space made it impossible for him to hit the target. Calculated based on the flight speed of the transport ship, no matter how the spacecraft evaded, these 7 missiles could accurately hit the hull. In addition to the damage the transport ship suffered when passing through the eruption area, once hit by this wave of missiles, the entire ship would even disintegrate directly in the air. In a flash, Uzio made an extremely bold decision. Crossing Shine clenched the giant axe in his hand and jumped directly from the top of the ship. Crossing Shine. The captain shouted Crossing Shine's name loudly in the communication channel, but Uzio had no time to respond at this time. The whistling airflow hit Crossing Shine's body, and the Mars rising from the black earth kept passing by Crossing Shine. 7 spiral flying missiles are already in sight. Target locked fire. The giant caliber metal bullets were once again pushed into the gun barrel along with the ammunition belt. The 8 heavy machine guns rotated on the chain drive while shooting at the oncoming target. Bang, bang, bang. Several flames penetrated the 3 missiles in flight, detonating the high-energy explosives in the missiles on the spot. The next second, Crossing Shine passed through the black fog produced by the explosion and aimed the machine body at the transport ship that was getting farther and farther away from him. Bang, bang. 2 more missiles were hit by the bullets fired by the machine gun and exploded in midair. At this moment, Crossing Shine's falling angle had exceeded the maximum range of the machine gun's vertical movement and could not continue to fire. Uzio could only watch the remaining 2 missiles hit the transport ship, instantly destroying the engines on the left and right sides of the hull. At this time, the transport ship was almost reduced to a dot in the eyes of the falling Crossing Shine. Due to the special interference here, Crossing Shine has exceeded the communication range with the transport ship. All he could do was listen to the electromagnetic noise in the communicator and watch the huge ship fall into the distant land with flames and thick smoke. Uzio suppressed his unwillingness and adjusted the posture of his body in the last section of his fall. Harden. Using the flexibility of Lingaiu's elastic muscle unit, Uzio forced Crossing Shine to land on the ground with one knee on the ground. Boom. A circle of violent airwaves spread around Crossing Shine, stirring up countless dust and slag. After confirming that the body was not damaged, Uzio immediately cast his eyes to the sky, but all he saw was the last picture of the black ship falling to the ground. At this moment, he suddenly received a prompt from the system. Unknown communication signal detected. Do you want to connect? Is there any lost friendly forces here? No, it's impossible. At least it's impossible for anyone to survive near the volcano. And even if someone survived, they couldn't fail to recognize the transport ship of the Watcher Alliance. How could they attack us with missiles? Unless. In order to further confirm his thoughts, Uzio chose to connect to the communication. Where are you? The other end of the communicator was filled with electromagnetic noise and rapid breathing, as if the person speaking had a language barrier. Uzio's pupils in the consciousness space suddenly contracted, and he immediately hung up the communication. He guessed right. Unrecognizable hostile Mecha detected. System analysis in progress. Unknown error in system analysis. Reason: enemy unit has multiple identification information. Open the error report details and list all relevant identification information. Uzio was sure that he had encountered the same situation as the Silent Cemetery, or even worse. Mecha code: Ghost King, destroyed. Model: specialized 3rd generation decisive battle mecha. Drivers: Mitsuta Kuto, deceased. Yuta Hanashi, deceased. Mecha performance: 3rd generation variable frequency nuclear power Dama. Height 75 meters, weight 13,900 tons, equipment module, Spark 2.0 intelligent AI system, Teiji biological toxin slashing knife, Ghost Meru radiation energy cannon, Shadow spiral tracking missile, combat rating, sea level, 5100 points. The third generation flagship mecha made by Zori Country. Although Yuzao was sure that this mecha could not be compared with the current Xingqian, he still did not dare to underestimate the enemy. No one knew what the combat power of the third generation mecha controlled by the monster would be. Monster name, Heretic. Monster type, Type 3. Energy level 4. Monster rating, Strength 7, Agility 8, Defense 6. Monster characteristics. The Heretic has a spider-like body, and 8 legs covered with sharp barbs can easily cut through various artificial alloys. Unlike spiders, Heretics have no head. Their 8 purple eyes and a pair of fangs are all on their chests. The venom secreted by Heretics not only has a strong corrosive effect, but also splits during flight. Weaknesses: eyes, poison sacs. Records: a level 4 monster that appeared in the 13th year of Apocalypse, raised the capital of the United Kingdom of Frigga, Miro, and destroyed a 3rd generation mecha and 2 2nd generation mechas of the Natural Evolution Legion. After the city was destroyed, it retreated into the sea and lost its trace. It should be noted that the intelligence of Heretics in this battle was very amazing. Boom. 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 A dark red painted mecha walked out from behind the hill in front of Crossing Cheyenne. It was a half-destroyed head, and the missing part had been filled with bulging flesh. The Ghost King's body was not damaged much, and it could even be said to be quite intact. Only the shoulders and waist had obvious armor damage and cracks, but now these cracks have long been glued together by the creeping flesh. What made Yuzao feel sick was that the 8 eyeballs of the Heretic were distributed on both sides of the Ghost King's power furnace like tumors, squeezed in the gap of the chest armor. Behind the Ghost King's body, there were 8 spider legs that were taller than the Ghost King's body, and the 2 legs at the end were even dragged on the ground like paralysis. Now, this mecha that merged with the monster was holding a purple long knife and approaching Crossing Cheyenne's position step by step. Found you. Yuzao listened to the other party speaking word by word, and his tone seemed to be full of joy. Squeak. The armor on the Ghost King's abdomen suddenly collapsed, revealing a mouth with 3 pairs of fangs, and a scream like leather friction. Yuzao was very sure that, if he was still a human now, he would definitely be stimulated by this creepy scream and his scalp would be numb. After the scream ended, the 8 spider legs behind the Ghost King suddenly opened, and the giant feet as sharp as sickles gently bent, and sent this mecha weighing 10,000 tons into the air. The next second, Crossing Cheyenne saw the Ghost King slashing towards him with a knife. Chapter 54, Heretic Demon. Clang. The purple slashing knife and the black giant axe collided at this moment, and the roar from the metal spread wantonly on the ground. The ripple-like vibration distorted the air and blew away all the sparks rising from the ground. The rock under Crossing Cheyenne's feet instantly had 7 cracks more than 10 meters long. Under the control of the Heretic, the strength of the Ghost King has indeed exceeded the panel value. If the 2nd generation Mecha Blue Eagle parasitized by the Demon Shark can tie with the standardized 3rd generation Mecha, then the Ghost King parasitized by the level 4 monster Heretic can crush multiple 3rd generation mechas at once. Yuzao can even feel that the Ghost King has not yet used his full strength in this attack. Sure enough, after the first collision between the 2 mechas, the power applied by the Ghost King on the slashing knife suddenly increased. The speed of the power furnace on Crossing Cheyenne's chest began to increase, and the hands holding the axe handle gradually exerted force, firmly stuck the purple slashing knife in place. Just when Yuzao thought that the Ghost King would continue to compete with him in strength, the Ghost King suddenly pushed his shoulders forward and used his huge body to crash into the 2 stalemated weapons. Boom. Crossing Cheyenne's hands holding the axe handle trembled suddenly. The sudden impact almost made him lose his balance. Fortunately, after installing the Lingayu muscle unit, Crossing Cheyenne decisively stepped back, changed his posture, and barely stabilized his center of gravity. However, the Ghost King also seized the opportunity of Crossing Cheyenne's brief imbalance, and launched a second attack. The 8 spider legs as sharp as sickles pounced on Crossing Cheyenne's body from different angles at the same time. In a hurry, Crossing Cheyenne suddenly raised his back foot as a fulcrum, and while turning sideways, he transferred most of the power to the hand holding the front end of the axe handle. The black axe stuck to the blade and slid down all the way, forcibly pressing the huge chopping knife to the ground, scraping out a string of dazzling sparks. But Yuzao's sideways movement failed to completely avoid the Ghost King's attack, and her spider legs still pierced the black armor covering Crossing Shine's surface. Fortunately, the counterattack of the black armor interrupted the movement of the two spider legs and prevented the barbs on their legs from piercing into the body skeleton. Otherwise, when the two spider legs were pulled out, Crossing Shine's internal parts would also be pulled out. But when Yuzao temporarily suppressed the opponent's close-range attack, the chest armor of the Ghost King suddenly began to deform. The dark red armor retreated to the surroundings and was replaced by a set of ring-shaped metal devices that surrounded the power furnace, and 4 X-shaped electric acceleration superconducting wires were also exposed. The next second, a light green beam of light spurted out from the Ghost King's power furnace and shot straight at Crossing Shine's head. Harden. After activating the skill, Crossing Shine directly released his hands holding the giant axe, and while jumping back, he wrapped the metal chainsword around the axe handle and took it out together. Although the use of hardening prevented the head from being pierced on the spot, the huge impact caused by the beam still caused Crossing Shine to fall heavily to the ground from mid-air. In a flash, Crossing Shine used one hand to thrust the heavy axe directly into the rock, using it as a fulcrum to force himself to stop rolling. Seeing that the radiation beam failed to cause damage to Crossing Shine's head, the Ghost King immediately changed the angle and aimed the continuously sprayed light at other parts of Crossing Shine's body. Fortunately, Yuzao used full body hardening for safety reasons. The light green radiation beam shot him from head to toe, but failed to cause substantial damage to Crossing Shine. However, this large-scale hardening cannot last too long, and the cooldown time of the skill will become very long. Just when the hardening effect was about to end in 2 seconds, the beam shining on Crossing Shine suddenly disappeared. Yuzao looked up and saw that the Ghost King's power furnace was dim, and 6 red metal pillars drilled out of the Ghost King's body, emitting bursts of steaming heat. The radiation energy cannon just now seems to be the Ghost King's strongest weapon. The longest duration of the beam is 12 seconds. After using it, the machine will be forced to eject the heatsink, and the power reactor will temporarily decrease. Yuzao stood up from the ground with the giant axe, watching the Ghost King vigilantly. From the perspective of physical strength alone, the spider legs attack should not be able to penetrate the black armor in one go. The problem lies in the corrosive venom secreted by the heretic. Yuzao pulled out the giant axe stuck in the ground and approached the Ghost King step by step. Melee combat requires facing the Ghost King's slashing knife and spider legs at the same time. The slashing knife has a large range and slow speed. Once hit, it will either die or be disabled. The spider legs have a small range and fast speed, but the damage to the machine is relatively light, as long as you don't face the slashing knife and spider legs at the same time. Crossing Shine gradually quickened his pace, silently feeling the increasingly loud roar deep in the machine, and the heavy giant axe in his hand dragged a deep crack on the black ground. Suddenly, the chainsword under Crossing Shine's arm once again entangled the axe handle, and the power reactor on the chest of the machine also turned blood red. Overload mode is on. Soul Sync. A dazzling blue light covered all the muscle units on Crossing Shine's body. At the same time, Crossing Shine slightly bent his waist, and the red light of the one eye on his head burst out. The next second, Crossing Shine's huge mechanical foot stepped on the ground and made a deep pit. Bang! When Crossing Shine started running, the air in front of the body was instantly squeezed, forming a shockwave visible to the naked eye. By entering the overload mode and strengthening the linguo-elastic muscle unit, Crossing Shine briefly gained a speed that was not possible for his body size. The black giant axe raised bursts of dust on the ground, but these dust were left behind by Crossing Shine, who was running at high speed. The Ghost King immediately realized the danger, and the 8 spider legs immediately propped up the weak body, turned his back to Crossing Shine, and began to flee. Crossing Shine, as violent as a beast, pulled the giant axe from the ground and changed to holding it with both hands, madly shortening the distance between himself and the Ghost King. In just a few seconds, the Ghost King realized that he would be caught up by Crossing Shine sooner or later, so he changed his form and aimed his body at Crossing Shine, who was charging at him, while his 8 spider legs were still carrying his body backwards. When the Ghost King turned around, Yuzao found that the speed of the opponent's power furnace had returned to normal, and it would probably recover to its peak in less than 5 seconds. According to the relative speed of Crossing Shine and the Ghost King, when the Ghost King entered Crossing Shine's farthest attack range, Crossing Shine had less than 2 seconds to launch an attack. When the Ghost King was weak, 2 seconds, 1 attack, too many variables. It was difficult for Yuzao to guarantee that this attack would cause fatal damage to the Ghost King. Once he failed, the Ghost King, who had recovered his strength, would suppress him again in close combat. Just before Yuzao made a decision, the armor on both sides of the waist of the Ghost King's body suddenly unfolded, revealing 6 missile launch holes, and the 7th launch hole was actually located at the connection between the torso and the lower body. Bang bang bang. The distance between the two mechas was very close, and all 7 missiles hit. Flames and thick smoke engulfed Crossing Shine. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 55 Stupid Things. The Ghost King had achieved his goal. Regardless of whether the 7 missiles caused substantial damage to Crossing Shine, they successfully delayed Crossing Shine's pace, even if the time was only 1 second. Whoosh! A black giant axe flew out from the billowing smoke, penetrated the sound barrier with an unstoppable force, and rushed straight to the Ghost King's power reactor. At this moment, the 8 spider legs behind the Ghost King were all stretched straight and inserted into the ground. It knew that it was too late to completely avoid this attack by jumping, so it chose to dodge sideways to minimize the damage. In the end, the giant axe only grazed the Ghost King's shoulder armor and cut off 2 spider legs. Because the giant axe was flying too fast, Yuzao couldn't even use the chainsaw wrapped around the axe handle to achieve an aerial turn. Not to mention that, even if the giant axe's flight trajectory could be forcibly changed, it would take at least 1 second. And the Ghost King was only 2 seconds away from fully recovering his strength. The 8 purple eyeballs on the Ghost King's chest watched Crossing Shine miss the best opportunity to attack. Human, stupid. A text message was transmitted to Crossing Shine's communication device. Just when the long handle of the giant axe was about to completely pass over the Ghost King's body, the silver chainsword suddenly loosened the axe handle, letting the giant axe fly out like a meteor. Then, the chainsword flashing with metallic light slashed towards the eyeballs on the Ghost King's chest. Swish! The Ghost King, who had just finished dodging, didn't even have time to pull his spider legs out of the rock, and 4 of his eyeballs exploded on the spot. Squeak! The Ghost King once again screamed like leather friction. However, the chainsword stained with green beast blood did not stop, but took advantage of the situation to tightly entangle the purple slashing knife in the Ghost King's hand. But what Yuzao didn't expect was that when he was about to use this last second of weakness to pull the slashing knife out of the opponent's hand, the Ghost King's remaining 6 spider legs actually pierced into the rock and forcibly pulled the slashing knife. Target locked fire. 8 heavy machine guns fired at the same time, pouring all the last spare bullets and the ammunition chain onto the Ghost King. As all 6 cooling columns on his body broke, the Ghost King screamed and loosened his hand holding the long sword, and took the initiative to avoid the firepower of Xingshan's turret. Only here did Yuzao's battle plan enter the theme. He didn't expect that throwing the giant axe could cause damage to the Ghost King at the beginning, because from the previous battle, Yuzao found that the Ghost King was very agile, always vigilant, and never careless. This unexpected attack may be difficult for people to react, but for the Ghost King, it can only be regarded as an extremely fast attack. So Yuzao decided to treat throwing the giant axe as the first attempt, and use the exaggerated flying speed of the giant axe to quickly bring the chainsword in his hand to the Ghost King. Once the giant axe failed to cause effective damage, Yuzao immediately controlled the chainsword to break away from the giant axe and directly snatched the slashing knife, while the Ghost King was weak, but this time the angle was just enough to allow the chainsword to pass through the gap in the Ghost King's chest armor, thus piercing its 4 protruding eyeballs. If the Ghost King chooses to resist at this time, then the two mechas will be in a stalemate, and Yuzaro can use the time when the Ghost King cannot move to aim at the cooling column that has not yet retracted and destroy it, thereby paralyzing the opponent's Ghost Pill radiation energy cannon. In this way, Yuzaro does not have to save the harden skill for the Ghost King's beam, and can use it more flexibly for attack or defense. When the purple slashing knife flew into Crossing Shine's hands, the Dragon Gorilla turret group also emptied its last round of ammunition. Next is close combat. Crossing Shine tightly grasped the slashing knife and rushed towards the Ghost King, while the overload mode and the machine soul synchronization were still in effect. Compared with the giant axe, the slashing knife is much inferior in destructive power, but the wider strike range combined with Crossing Shine's violent power makes it a more suitable weapon to deal with the Ghost King. With just a few steps, Crossing Shine has already stuck in front of the Ghost King. Crossing Shine waved his hand, and the purple blade slashed towards the Ghost King's abdomen. Due to the loss of two spider legs, and Crossing Shine's speed was several times faster than before, the Ghost King could no longer suppress Crossing Shine with his agility advantage. The huge slashing knife drew a half crescent moon in the air, and the Ghost King barely avoided this slash by retreating. However, Crossing Shine's attack was not over yet. Before the Ghost King's body could stand firm, he saw Crossing Shine stretched out his other hand without the knife. The metal chainsword stained with animal blood tightly wrapped around the Ghost King's head. At the same time, Crossing Shine exerted force with one hand and directly pulled the Ghost King towards himself. The sharp blade directly penetrated the Ghost King's head, and the metal and flesh shattered together with the sound of the knife. Bang bang bang. More than a dozen missiles were fired from the launcher on the Ghost King's waist one after another, but they all flew into the sky ignited by flames like headless flies. Crossing Shine took advantage of the situation and kicked the Ghost King's torso, completely pulling off the opponent's head. Although destroying the cockpit on the head won't stop the monster mecha from operating, the monster will also lose some control over the mecha. At least it won't be able to aim at the target with missiles. Yuzaro analyzed while smashing the Ghost King's head that was stuck on the blade with his hands. As expected by Yuzaro, the Ghost King, who was originally agile, now has a hard time even getting up from the ground. If you lose the ability to control the mecha, then this steel body will become a burden on the monster. As if to respond to Yuzaro's thoughts, the Ghost King's movements began to become sluggish, and that uncoordinated movement was obviously not something that a mecha could do, as if the mecha was no longer driven by mechanical bones and muscle units, but a mass of flesh and blood trapped under the armor. Squeak. Finally, the armor on the Ghost King's body began to swell, and the rapidly growing flesh and blood seemed to be about to burst the cage that trapped the monster. Yuzaro naturally couldn't just sit back and watch this seemingly disturbing process. Crossing Shine changed to holding the knife with both hands, exerted force suddenly, and directly stabbed the sharp slashing knife into the power furnace on the Ghost King's chest. Puff. A ball of dark green liquid suddenly spurted out from the Ghost King's abdominal armor, instantly melting the black armor covering the surface of Crossing Shine's body. Yuzaro didn't even react to what happened. Warning, chest armor damaged by 71%. Yuzaro could feel that the poisonous liquid was rapidly corroding Crossing Shine's armor, and it would not take long for it to penetrate into the body's bones. He then realized that the reason why this cunning monster had not been spitting venom was because its venom sac was blocked by mechanical parts. Is this lucky or unfortunate? At this moment, Yuzaro didn't have time to think about it. Even if he knew that this venom would severely injure himself, he couldn't let go of this heretic parasitic in the Ghost King. Hardened. The purple slashing knife was immediately covered with black. Bang. The blade of dozens of meters long penetrated the power furnace of the Ghost King. Yuzaro just watched the Ghost King slowly fall down in front of him and stopped moving. Chapter 56 Emergency Landing. It has been detected that you have killed the unique target, Heretic. The system has added the combat skill Venom to your skill column. Yuzaro finally stopped exerting force until the system popped up a kill prompt and pulled the purple slashing knife out of the Ghost King's power furnace. Skill name, Violent Poison. Skill level 1. Skill description, can temporarily attach the venom secreted by the heretic to the melee weapon. After hitting the target, it will leave a toxin value that lasts for 180 seconds. When the toxin value accumulates to 100%, it will cause an irresistible poison explosion to the target. Note, each time the target is hit, the duration of the toxin value will be refreshed. The accumulation of toxin value depends on the degree of damage caused by this attack to the target, as well as the target's resistance to toxins. This rule also applies to the damage caused by poison explosions. After reading the skill description, Yuzao tried to use this skill. A layer of dark green venom immediately appeared on the purple slashing knife, as if this venom was secreted from the blade. The attachment time is only 30 seconds, and the cooling time is fixed at 1 minute. The attached weapon will not be corroded by the venom, but it can only be attached to melee weapons, not other parts or equipment. Yuzao was a little disappointed that the venom could not be attached to bullets. The current venom can effectively damage level 4 monsters, and increasing the skill level will also increase the venom damage. After mastering the detailed information of the skill, Yuzao decided to take the slashing knife to find his giant axe first. After walking for nearly 5 minutes, Yuzao found his battle axe on a concave rock wall. If this attack could hit the Ghost King at that time, the battle would have ended faster. After picking up the battle axe he had been thinking about, Yuzao cast his sights in the direction where the transport ship fell. From the map, it should be the defensive city built by the Alliance on the 4th line of defense, Blackhorn City. If Yuzao remembered correctly, then the initial mission of the Red Hurricane was to support the Alliance troops in Blackhorn City and buy time for the people to evacuate. Whether dead or alive, I want to confirm it with my own eyes. Crossing Cheyenne held a knife in one hand and an axe in the other, and walked towards the direction where the transport ship fell. At 11 o'clock, 2 mutant green rats. At 3 o'clock, a mutant hound. Beiyang listened to the information in the communicator while driving the Mecha towards the 2 mutant green rats. Swoosh. Manuscript 03 pulled out 2 high-frequency hot cutting swords named Flame behind him, and the armor on his body began to deform, reducing the air resistance to the minimum. The light Mecha exerted force with both feet and jumped into the air. The 2 orange-red blades cut the spine of the mutant green rat in a perfect arc. Ah! The mutant green rat wailed and fell to the ground. Manuscript 03, who had completed a flip in the air, stepped on the neck of the mutant green rat behind him, and then gracefully landed sideways, while turning the high-frequency hot cutting sword in his hand half a circle, chopping off the head of the mutant green rat. At this moment, the mutant hound at 3 o'clock chose to ignore the Manuscript 03 driven by Beiyang, and rushed towards the ground forces in the black sky. At the critical moment, the back armor of Manuscript 03 suddenly deformed, and 2 wing-like mechanical devices unfolded from the back of the Mecha, revealing 6 launch holes. Bang, bang, bang. 6 macro missiles with blue tail flames flew out of the launch holes, and each missile decomposed into 4 mini missiles on the way. The whole scene looked like a dreamy swarm of fireflies. The next second, the missile group directly exploded a series of blue flames on the mutant hound. When the smoke dissipated, the mutant hound that fell to the ground had more than 20 bloody wounds on its body. This was the 7th monster that Beiyang had killed. Behind Manuscript 03 was a transport ship with half of its hull buried underground, and a gully covered with metal fragments. The transport ship of the Black Sky was equipped with 2 spare engines. After being hit by the missile, the transport ship relied on these 2 engines hidden in the hull to avoid the fate of crashing. At least according to the seriously injured captain, this was not a crash, but an emergency landing. However, luck did not favor everyone a second time. The huge commotion caused by the transport ship's forced landing attracted the monsters entrenched in Blackhorn City. From the moment Beiyang drove the Manuscript 03 out of the hangar, the monsters' attacks never stopped. Although the monsters that attacked were all recorded in the Alliance database, everyone still found the abnormalities of these monsters. First, these guys who were supposed to be level 3 monsters were displayed as between level 3 and level 4 in the energy radar. Secondly, their appearance has all changed. Although the appearance features have been retained, their skin color has uniformly become a dark color similar to volcanic ash, and there are blood vessels similar to magma on the surface of the skin. Finally, the mutated monsters have become more violent in action, and their resistance to live ammunition weapons has increased significantly. Beiyang was glad that he was driving this Manuscript 03. If he had been driving a third generation Mecha, it would have been difficult to balance destroying the monsters and protecting everyone. Even so, Beiyang could only focus on dealing with these monsters of the same size as herself. She could only leave the 5-meter long Type 2nd monsters to the ground troops. 12 o'clock. 2 energy signals approaching at high speed. At this moment, the scout's report came through Beiyang's headset again. TSK. It's endless. Beiyang controlled the Manuscript 03 to aim at the 12 o'clock direction, holding the sword in both hands, ready to attack at any time. Wait. There is a signal. That is not a monster. The scout's voice trembled slightly. It's a Mecha. The second generation Mecha of the United Front Corps. Second generation? Bang. Beiyang's exclamation was just drowned out by the huge impact sound. A Mecha with a height of 75 meters appeared in Beiyang's field of vision. At this moment, he was using his mechanical arm to clamp the neck of a mutant green rat. Then, the Mecha raised its other hand, a hand holding a half-cutting knife. Ouch. The purple Mecha used the broken blade to penetrate the mutant green rat's head from left to right. The broken blade was pulled out, splashing pus all over the ground. Beiyang looked at the purple Mecha in disbelief. Not only were there many battle scars left by the years on the opponent's body, but there was also fresh blood of beasts with a pungent smell. This Mecha had killed many mutant monsters before coming here. Is this really something that a second generation Mecha can do? At this moment, a vicissitudes of life voice sounded in Beiyang's communicator. It was a public channel that everyone could hear. Are you the Black Sky Legion? Chapter 57, Lost Land. Mecha code name, Heioji, machine model, specialized second generation defender Mecha, pilots, Sato Yu, Yoshia Kaneono, deceased, machine performance, second generation nuclear powered armor, height 70 meters, weight 12,500 tons. Equipment module, Spark holographic intelligence system, Shaosheng alloy sword, heavy shoulder mounted cannon, double layer alloy armor, explosive foot spikes. Is it Colonel Sato Yu of the United Front? As the captain was seriously injured and unconscious, the commander of the ground armed forces temporarily took over the command. Not the colonel, but the pilot. Sato Zion corrected seriously. If you appear here, it means that the alliance has not given up the fourth line of defense. Yes, our legion was attacked by an unknown missile when crossing Duyu Mountain. Crossing Cheyenne abandoned the ship to protect the fleet and is now missing. Crossing Cheyenne? Sato Zion's tone suddenly became serious. You even used retired mechas. It's not 10 years ago now. Doing so will kill Crossing Cheyenne's driver. The situation is a bit complicated. The captain realized that the fourth line of defense was in a signal shielding state and had no idea what had happened recently. In short, Crossing Cheyenne can act on his own. He doesn't need other drivers. Are you kidding? Although Sato Zion knew that the other party could not be joking in this situation, he still couldn't believe it. Did the alliance develop some fully automatic driving technology? Crossing Cheyenne has self-awareness. We are not kidding. I'm his former pilot. Since the two sides were talking on the public channel, Beiyang explained. However, Beiyang only said this sentence and closed his mouth, leaving precious time to the captain and Sato Zion. What Beiyang said is right. We can explain this matter slowly later. The regiment commander affirmed Beiyang's statement. Colonel Sato, can you introduce the situation here first? Yes, but we are not safe now. Things are a bit complicated. I will try to be brief. Sato Yu approached the location of the transport ship while being vigilant of monsters that might attack at any time. 3 days ago, our legion was attacked by a tide of beasts. Although we have made preparations in advance, the scale of the tide of beasts is far beyond imagination. We had to abandon the coastline and retreat inland. Blackhorn City is the first line of defense in the inland and the most strongly defended city in the entire archipelago. Therefore, we left behind 2 ground armed regiments and 3 mechas, and let the transport ships and the people evacuate first. At this point, Sato Yu paused obviously. Not long after the others evacuated, Mount Duyu suddenly activated and erupted. All signals were blocked. We cut off all contact with the outside world and could only hold on here. Beiying looked to his side silently. The uneven road surface was filled with crushed vehicles like toys. The collapsed buildings crushed the street lamps on both sides of the street. The thick high walls were covered with cracks and holes, and the scrapped heavy machine guns were still hung with incomplete corpses. Every few blocks, there were several monster corpses with hideous expressions. The coagulated blood of the beasts dyed everything around them green. Only the broken pieces of meat and the cold giant metal shells occasionally made sounds in the wind. Without Satoru speaking, the people in the black sky had already guessed what this city and the people who were defending here had experienced. Although it was indeed like hell, some of us still survived. Satoru hid his slight sigh. After the beast tide broke through the main defense facilities of Blackhorn City, only a small number of monsters were left to clean up our remaining troops, and most of the monsters were only concerned with moving forward. The number left behind is definitely not small. According to Beiying's own estimation, there were more than 20 monster corpses here alone. If you had seen the scale of the beast tide that landed, you wouldn't think so. At this point, Satoru's tone was only filled with amazement. But isn't the purpose of the monsters to destroy humans? Why would they let you go and continue to advance? In the captain's memory, those monsters that successfully landed would definitely move after completely destroying the city. Maybe it's tactics. Don't you find that those level 4 monsters are becoming more and more difficult to deal with? Satoru, who was sitting in the cockpit, narrowed his left eye. They can think like humans, formulate strategies, cooperate with each other, and even command low-level monsters to fight. Roar. Just as everyone was exchanging information, a shrill scream suddenly came from the ruins of the city. What is that? The captain's heart once again rose to his throat. It's a level 4 monster that we've never seen before. It was the first to break through the defense of Blackhorn City, and it was the one that stayed behind to eliminate us. Sato's tone gradually became colder. Be careful, its brain is no worse than ours. The noise of your forced landing will definitely attract it. I came here to take you away before it arrives. Where to? Hearing about the level 4 monster, the captain suddenly became nervous. Blackhorn Underground Industrial Base. Sato's eyes were fixed on the direction where the voice came from. Leave the equipment. That can't be taken away. We have to leave now. Everyone listen up. Abandon all equipment that needs tools to transport. Take the necessities for survival and follow Colonel Sato. The captain immediately issued an order. What about crossing Cheyenne? Beiying believed that crossing Cheyenne would not die easily, and he would definitely come to find everyone. Do you need me to stay and pick him up? We will leave signal transmitters along the way, and crossing Cheyenne can find us, as long as he follows the beacon. The leader had already thought of a solution. The most urgent task is to cover everyone's safe evacuation. You are our strongest combat force, and we need you. After hesitating for a moment, Beiying looked at the black land in the distance, which was the place where Crossing Cheyenne last jumped off the ship. Okay. 20 minutes later, outside Blackhorn City, Crossing Cheyenne held a knife in his left hand and an axe in his right hand, and came to the location where the Black Sky transport ship made an emergency landing. There was no one here, no Mecha, and except for 8 monsters lying on the ground, Yuziro did not see anything that could be called a living thing. A large amount of heavy equipment was abandoned inside the transport ship. It was obvious that this was a planned evacuation. What made everyone abandon these equipment and supplies to leave this place? Just as Yuziro looked around, he suddenly found a signal transmitter that was in operation. Loading content. A holographic map suddenly appeared in front of Yuziro. This is the beacon they left behind, and it is continuous. Yuziro followed the line of the beacon to find the location of everyone. Suddenly, Yuziro's pupils suddenly contracted. In a blue line, a dazzling red suddenly appeared at the end of the line. They are in danger. Chapter 58 Unknown Target. Roar. A huge black tail hit the 100-meter high building directly, and with the sound of the air being cut, the upper part of the entire building collapsed on the spot. Countless rubble and smoke filled the entire street, making the city, which had already turned into ruins, even more broken. Beiying drove the manuscript 03 at full power and barely jumped back to avoid the swift attack just now. She underestimated the monster in front of her. When Satoyu led the army to the XC area, this unprecedented level 4 monster finally appeared in front of everyone. Because the entrance to the underground industrial base was not far away, in order to avoid being discovered by the monster, Beiying chose to take the initiative to attack, attracting the monster's attention and letting others retreat first. She did not do this on impulse. First, Mississippi 03 is an experimental mecha. According to Beiying's own estimation, even if it cannot completely crush the level 4 monster, at least it will not fall behind. Second, Beiying can fight with the level 4 monster while shifting the battlefield to the way they came. This way, everyone can stay away from danger and meet up with Crossing Shan, who is looking for everyone along the way as soon as possible. Third, because it is a monster that has never been seen before, Beiying needs to collect intelligence about the opponent in actual combat. Even if the monster cannot be destroyed in this battle, it can help the next battle plan. However, the reality is more cruel than Beiying imagined, because all her ideas must be based on the fact that Manuscript 03 will not be suppressed by the monster. But Beiying never thought that this monster is not only far superior to Manuscript 03 in strength, but also on par with Manuscript 03 in speed. Whoosh! 9 spikes cut through the air, flew out of the rolling smoke, and stabbed directly at the Manuscript 03 driven by Beiying. Manuscript 03, who had just landed from the back jump, could not continue to dodge and could only cross the 2 orange-red high-frequency hot swords in front of him to block as many of these spikes as possible. Warning: shoulder armor damaged by 31%, leg armor damaged by 34%. After a sound of metal collision, 4 more cracks appeared on the shoulder and leg of Manuscript 03. TSK. Beiying couldn't help the feeling of frustration. These 4 spikes inserted into the body of the machine would not only affect the self-repair of the armor, but their location would also further slow down the movement speed of Manuscript 03. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Another batch of spikes flew from the same direction. This time Beiying chose to dodge to the side in the mecha. Taking advantage of the intricate high-rise buildings and relatively complex terrain in the central city, Beiying kept moving between the bunkers while putting away the sword in his right hand and pulling out the spikes inserted in the body. After Beiying controlled Manuscript 03 to roll to the back of a high-rise building, the opponent completely stopped the long-range attack. Beiying, with his back against the building, looked at the slowly moving red dot on the energy radar and pulled out the high-frequency hot sword behind him with his right hand again. If her guess was correct, the monster should have temporarily lost the position of Manuscript 03. Opportunity. Shiro lowered the power of the power reactor and adjusted his posture so that the body was completely covered by the shadow of the building. This was one of the characteristics of Manuscript 03. While reducing the power of the power reactor, the noise generated by the body was almost completely eliminated. Thanks to the dual-core power system used by Omega, this experimental mecha can increase the power of the power reactor from the lowest to the highest in 0.7 seconds. As long as Shiro can launch an attack from the dark, he can use the high-frequency hot sword to give the monster a fatal blow. As time passed, the red dot on the energy radar was getting closer and closer to Shiro's position. Shiro in the cockpit even held her breath with the motionless Manuscript 03, as if she would not fall into her trap again if she spoke. Boom. 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 The monster's footsteps were very slow, as if it was the suppressed party. Listening to the monster's very regular footsteps, Shiro, who was waiting for the opportunity, suddenly felt a faint uneasiness. Why did the offense and defense of the two sides switch at this time? Even when the monster just saw the Manuscript 03 and Heioji mechas, it did not stop its violent attack. Now facing only one mecha that was injured by itself, why did it become so cautious again? Is it just because it is afraid of being ambushed? Boom. 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 Beiying listened to her originally calm heartbeat becoming faster and faster until the sound echoed in her mind like a drum. She tried hard to think about these questions, but in the absence of intelligence from the other party, she could not get any answers at all. Boom. 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 When the footsteps of the monster were almost close to her ears, an uncontrollable panic swallowed up Beiying's reason irresistibly. This was a warning from the survival instinct. Beiying and the monster did not exchange offense and defense at all. Its slow pace was not because of vigilance, but confidence. It felt like a hunter swaggering into his own hunting ground to slaughter the prey that had been trapped in a trap. The footsteps stopped. The power reactor on Manuscript 03's chest suddenly glowed brightly, and the nearly dormant body increased its power to the maximum in less than a second. At the same time, Beiying also raised the high-frequency hot sword in his hand at the fastest speed and swung it towards the side of the building in advance. Bang! The next second, the monster's bat-like head came out from the side of the tall building. The restless air boiled around the orange-red sword body, and the slightly vibrating sword edge stopped above the monster's neck, as if it was frozen. A thick pointed tail pierced through the right chest of Manuscript 03 from behind, rubbing the shell of the power reactor and swinging in the air. Neural synchronization protection is automatically activated. The chest armor is damaged by 42%, and the synchronization rate has been forcibly locked to 70%. The moment the monster stopped, Beiying finally realized that she was the prey, so she immediately decided to adjust the body posture first, and then find an opportunity to attack the monster. Unfortunately, Mississippi 03 didn't have time to unfold the armor to change its form, and was attacked by the monster's pointed tail from behind the building, while adjusting its posture. I can't go down. Shiro tried his best in the cockpit, but he couldn't move the hot sword down any further. In order to pursue higher coordination and faster speed, the skeleton and muscle units of the Manuscript 03 were designed to be an integrated structure similar to the human body. This advanced concept has not been realized in the Mecha informal service due to the production cycle and cost. However, this unique design also caused the monster to penetrate the right chest of Manuscript 03, which affected Shiro's control over the right arm of the Mecha. Shiro could even clearly feel that the thick tail was exerting force in the opposite direction inside the body of Manuscript 03, preventing her from making any movement. Roar. The monster let out a deafening roar. The next moment, it raised its strong front claws and grabbed the power reactor on the chest of Manuscript 03. Bang. Chapter 59 Absolute Suppression. 4 burning shells hit the protruding spine on the back of the unknown monster, causing an impact and igniting the long hair on the monster's back. Roar. The monster that was attacked roared angrily, and the flames burning on its hair immediately went out. When Satoyu's eyes met the monster, the 4 gun barrels on Heioji's abdomen fired another round of volleys. At the same time, the long tail that penetrated the Manuscript 03 suddenly exerted force, further penetrated the Mecha, and aimed the end of the tail at the incoming shells, shooting out 7 spikes. Boom. 4 shells exploded in the air 200 meters away from the monster, and the remaining 3 spikes continued to fly towards Heioji driven by Satoyu. Heioji did not have the high mobility of Manuscript 03, so he could only hold the broken sword horizontally in front of him. Ding ding. After hitting the blade, the 2 spikes flew to the side, but 1 spike still pierced into Heioji's leg armor, causing the Mecha to almost lose balance. The monster also seized the time when Heioji was injured, pulled its tail out of Manuscript 03's body, turned around and swung its tail at the injured Mecha. Neural synchronization protection is automatically activated. The chest armor is damaged by 74%, and the synchronization rate has been forcibly locked to 43%. The Manuscript 03, which weighed 10,000 tons, didn't even have time to stand firm, and it smashed 3 100-meter high buildings in succession like a toy with a string, and fell heavily to the ground. Along with Manuscript 03, Beiying in the cockpit was also injured. After experiencing a short period of weightlessness, the huge impact force caused the cockpit to shake violently. Beiying, who did not activate the magnetic adsorption immediately, had 2 ribs torn off by the fixator. The unbearable pain stimulated Beiying's nerves, and the synchronization rate that had been attenuated to half made it more difficult for her to control the Mecha. Stand up. Beiying panted heavily, trying to let Manuscript 03 use the high-frequency hot sword in her hand as support to climb up again. At the same time, the hero driven by Satoyu had already pulled out the spikes on his legs, and continued to fire with the H4 burning heavy artillery loaded on the belly of Hero. But this time, the monster did not choose to use the spikes to attack remotely, but rushed towards Hero directly under the firepower of the burning heavy artillery. Little ghost over there, run away if you can move. Sato Yu shouted to Beiying in the communicator, while controlling Hiro to swing the broken blade towards the building next to him. Countless glass was shattered under the slash of the broken blade, and the dusty mirror surface could not even reflect the sunlight, and fell on the street full of cracks. Bang! When the monster was about to rush to Hiro, the building that was cut in half also collapsed completely, and countless steel bars and rubble hit the monster's body. However, an accident happened. This violent monster resisted the pressure from its back, and before falling down, it tore off half of Hiro's mechanical arm with its strong and powerful forelimbs. TSK, can't we stop this guy? Sato looked at the girl in the control position on the other side. Bean, use the escape pod now. The girl with short black hair didn't say anything, but she shook her head at Sato very hard. Just as Sato was about to use force to disconnect Bean's nerve synchronization, the monster suddenly used its forelimbs to push up the building that was pressing on it. Raw. 4 heavy incendiary artillery directly hit the monster's face, but the flames that should have been burning were fleeting in the monster's roar. This was the last incendiary bomb on Heioji. The roaring monster threw half of the building at Heioji and directly pressed the latter to the ground. Before he could dodge, the broken sword flew out of Heioji's hand. Even if Sato turned the power to the maximum, Heioji couldn't use his one arm to push away the building pressing on the body. The monster with blood in its eyes jumped up and rode directly on Heioji and suppressed Heioji's limbs tightly. Bean, run. Sato had forced the system to disconnect Bean's neural synchronization, but Bean ran towards Sato, trying to untie the fastener on him. Too late. Buzz. Just as the monster opened its bloody mouth and was about to bite Heioji's head, a black object that was too fast to be caught by the naked eye suddenly knocked the monster out at a speed that penetrated the sound barrier. Friendly Mecha approaching. Confirm identification information. Crossing Cheyenne affiliation. Black Sky, did you sense the crisis at the end, so you lowered your body? Yuzaro looked at the monster that rolled on the ground for several times and couldn't help feeling a little uneasy. Reaction is really fast. He had clearly aimed at the monster's waist and threw the axe completely in the monster's blind spot, but only the axe part of the axe hit its back. This is a monster that has no record in the Alliance database, and Yuzaro currently knows nothing about it. From the appearance, it has a head similar to that of a bat, and it walks on all fours. Its sturdy forelimbs are obviously much larger than its 2 hind legs, and they also have sharp claws. Similar to a bat, it also has wing membranes between its forelimbs and body, but from the perspective of body structure, its wing membranes and forelimbs are definitely not enough to support flight. At most, they can only increase jumping power and use airflow. The tail, which is almost as long as the body, looks very similar to Zunlui, except that there is a large cluster of white bone spurs at the end of the tail. If it is hit, it will probably be stabbed into a hornet's nest on the spot. The most conspicuous thing is the black and red skin color of this monster. Like the monster corpse is seen near the transport ship, the skin surface of this monster is also distributed with magma-colored blood vessels. The energy level is between 4 and 5. It looks like it will be more difficult to deal with than the Heretic and the Ghost King. Thinking of this, Yuzaro already had the first step in mind. Crossing Cheyenne clenched the purple slash in his hand and charged directly at the monster. Roar. The monster with a back injury became obviously more angry than before, and the red light in its eyes even overflowed from its eye sockets. It suddenly lowered its body, tightened its limbs, and stretched its tail straight. The next second, the monster moved. So fast, Yuzaro could even see the circular shock wave that had not yet dissipated spreading in the air. Bang! When the monster's claws collided with the purple slashing knife, the sound of the blade's vibration instantly spread throughout the city. The power reactor on Crossing Cheyenne's chest turned directly red. Harden. Yuzaro immediately covered the entire body with skills and swung the knife before the monster's second claw attack arrived. However, before the sharp blade touched the monster, Crossing Cheyenne had already been hit by the second claw attack. Bang! Even though Crossing Cheyenne used the Lingayu elastic muscle unit to stabilize his center of gravity, the monster's claw attack still pushed him back 10 meters. This is a monster that even Crossing Cheyenne has difficulty dealing with. Chapter 60 Teamwork. The speed and strength are higher than that of Thunderbolt. Even if you turn on the hardening and attack with all your strength, you will be hit by the opponent before you succeed. After only 2 exchanges, Yuzao judged the terrifying strength of the monster in front of him. It is almost impossible to take the initiative in a frontal close combat. It might be better if there is a powerful long-range attack method. After repelling Crossing Shine for dozens of meters, the monster did not rush to launch the next attack. The two sides fell into a very short stalemate. Is it because of the black armor? Yuzao immediately found the answer, because he saw that the monster's right claw that had just been used to attack him was retracted. It's a pity that Yuzao can't win with this method. Crossing Shine is still in the hardening state, but judging from the intensity of the first 2 attacks, once the duration of the hardening ends, every attack of the monster will cause great damage to Crossing Shine's armor. In other words, before the monster is bounced to death, Crossing Shine will be torn into pieces first. What makes Yuzao even more headache is that the dragon-riding gorilla turret group on Crossing Shine has emptied all the ammunition, which directly cuts off the possibility of Crossing Shine's long-range attack. This all-round suppression forced Yuzao into a dilemma. In order to fight the monster in close combat, Crossing Shine could only turn on the overload mode and synchronize the machine soul again, temporarily raising the performance of the machine to the same level as the opponent. But the risk of doing so now is too high. Yuzao didn't even fully grasp all the information about the monster. Once the overload mode was turned on, it meant that Crossing Shine had to kill the opponent before the duration of the overload mode ended. Otherwise, when the overload mode and the synchronization of the machine soul both ended, Crossing Shine's machine performance would immediately drop to a point where it was not even as good as normal power. This was a skill combination that he could only use once in a battle, and he had to use it when he was absolutely sure or desperate. At this moment, Crossing Shine suddenly found that a light spot that had been silent on the energy radar for a long time was moving again. Manuscript 03. The 6 flying missiles disintegrated in the air and turned into 24 blue comets that flew between the buildings and flew towards the monster. Bang bang bang. Even though the monster dodged when it sensed danger, it still couldn't escape the fate of being hit by the split missile. A series of blue flames exploded on the monster's back. Unlike before, this time the flames not only did not go out, but also left a big wound on the monster's skin. At the same time, Crossing Shine also took advantage of the time when the hardening had not yet ended and raised the purple slashing knife and chopped directly at the monster's head. Bang! The sharp purple blade was blocked by the monster's strong forelimbs. Just as Crossing Shine was about to continue to exert force, the monster suddenly swung up its powerful tail and hit Crossing Shine's waist armor directly. The huge impact force once again pushed Crossing Shine back dozens of meters, but the bone spur at the end of the monster's tail was also broken in half due to the counterattack of the black armor. When Crossing Shine stabilized his body again, the duration of the hardening skill just ended. Raw. Perhaps out of fear of the black armor's counterattack, the monster did not continue to chase Crossing Shine, but instead rushed towards the Manuscript 03 driven by Beiying. Beiying, don't go head to head with the monster, hold it back. After Yuzao finished speaking on the public channel, he immediately inserted the purple slashing knife in his hand into the ground, turned around and ran to Heoji. Boom. Crossing Shine exerted force with both hands, slowly lifted the building that was pressing on Heoji, and finally threw it aside with force. Can you continue to fight? Crossing Shine stretched out his hand towards Heoji's only remaining arm. Ha. You look completely different now than what I recorded in my database. Although Sato you could not match the burly Mecha in front of him with the appearance of the first generation Crossing Shine, the system's recognition information would not be wrong. As long as you can give me a decent weapon. Heoji grabbed Crossing Shine's hand and let him pull him up from the ground. The knife is yours. After saying this, Crossing Shine ran at full speed directly towards the place where Beiying and the monster were. Bang, bang, bang. Beiying drove the Manuscript 03 and continuously attacked the monster with missiles, while using the tall building as a cover to deal with the monster. Since the synchronization rate between Beiying and the Mecha had been forced to be locked at 43%, and the body was seriously damaged, the current movement speed of Manuscript 03 was far less than when it was fully powered. Looking at the red dot on the energy radar approaching him at high speed, Beiying's heartbeat was getting faster and faster. Warning, the left wing missile launcher is damaged. Two spikes pierced the missile launch hole in the unfolded form from the back of Manuscript 03. At the same time, Crossing Shine holding a giant axe also appeared in front of Beiyang's vision. Roar. The monster's roar became more and more angry. Its strong limbs and developed muscles made it as agile as a cheetah when running. The giant tail that was, as long as its body would cause great damage every time it swung. It will soon catch up with the seriously injured and fleeing prey. Down. When the two mechas were less than 200 meters away from meeting, Yuzao suddenly shouted at Beiyang. Beiyang immediately understood what Crossing Shine meant. Manuscript 03 suddenly lowered its body, using its elbow joint as support, so that the entire body was attached to the ground. Amid the friction between metal and the ground, Manuscript 03 completed a slide at an almost perfect angle. The sharp claws of the monster finally just brushed past the shoulder armor of Manuscript 03, leaving a string of sparks. At this moment, a black shadow that was magnified at the speed of light suddenly appeared in the bloody pupils of the monster. Crossing Shine jumped into the air, holding the giant axe raised above his head, and chopped fiercely at the monster's claws that stretched forward. Bang! As the axe fell, a deep pit was instantly smashed into the ground, and around the pit, there were more than a dozen cracks spreading. The heavy giant axe directly embedded into the monster's thick front claws, smashing the hard animal bones into pieces. Roar. The monster let out a deafening scream, and its instinctive stress reaction made it quickly withdraw its broken front claws. Sizzle. Half of the monster's front paw was torn off alive as it struggled, and yellow-green blood gushed out of the broken forelimb of the monster like a spring. However, just as Yuzao was about to continue his attack, the mad monster suddenly straightened up by standing on two legs. A red ball of light gathered in the monster's abdomen, climbed up the monster's upper body along the spine, and spread to its head. The next second, a stream of blazing flames gushed out of the monster's mouth, engulfing Crossing Shine's tall body like a tsunami. Warning, 7% of the whole body armor is damaged. Warning, 15% of the whole body armor is damaged. Warning, 24% of the whole body armor is damaged. With every passing second, Crossing Shine's armor was melting at a speed visible to the naked eye. Chapter 61 A Desperate Fight. This is definitely not an ordinary flame. With the current material of Crossing Shine's body, it would not necessarily be melted, even if thrown into the crater. If Yuzao is not mistaken, this kind of flame breath must have been strengthened by some special energy. Creak. Yuzao heard the sound of the body's bones expanding due to heat. Warning, 34% of the whole body armor is damaged. The hardening skill still needs 30 seconds to cool down, but Crossing Shine's external armor has almost completely dissolved. What's worse is that the continuous extreme high temperature will directly make the body's cooling device completely scrapped. At that time, even if Crossing Shine has the life to start hardening, the power furnace will no longer be able to enter the overload mode. Just as Crossing Shine was struggling to hold on, a white figure suddenly appeared from the side and rear of the monster. Beiyang drove the Manuscript 03, holding two orange-red high-frequency heat-cutting swords, and ran straight to the back of the monster. Sure enough, the monster keenly noticed Beiyang's movements, and directly stopped breathing, and used the remaining front paw to slam the mecha that attacked from behind. It was not until then that the monster discovered that the wing armor behind Manuscript 03 was still deployed. When the monster's claws touched the mecha, 3 missiles were also fired from the wing armor. Due to the close distance, the missiles did not even have time to deploy in the air, and they directly hit the monster in a combined state. Boom. The blue flames instantly exploded between Manuscript 03's chest and the monster's head, and Manuscript 03, which was hit by the monster's claws, and the shock of the explosion, flew out on the spot. How dare this kid do this? Not far away, Heoji had also rejoined the battlefield with a purple slashing knife, but due to the current damage to the body and the single attack method, he had to wait patiently for the opportunity. Remember, this is a wrong demonstration. You can't use heavy firepower at that distance like that kid. Satoyu looked seriously at Daozi, who had returned to the control position, and the latter nodded vigorously to show that he understood. Overload mode is on. Soul Sync. The dazzling blue light once again covered the muscle units in Crossing Shine's body, and the high-speed power furnace also turned blood red. because the body is still in an overheated state. In order to avoid the complete destruction of the cooling device, Crossing Shine's overload mode can only be maintained for 20 seconds this time. Boom, boom, boom. The still boiling air whizzed past Crossing Shine's body, which was almost half melted. Every step of this Mecha would step out a shallow pit on the fragile surface. This time, Crossing Shine directly ignored the giant axe that he had stuck in the ground and ran straight towards the monster with empty hands. Yuzio must make good use of these short 20 seconds. Swinging the giant axe will only slow down his movements. What he wants now is not the absolute crushing power, but the same speed as the monster. Roar. When the crazy monster turned its head again, Yuzio suddenly discovered that half of its face had been blown into a bloody mess by the missile, and one of its originally terrifying red eyes was also blinded. Seeing that Crossing Shine was approaching him at a speed he had never seen before, the monster immediately straightened up, preparing to use his breath to melt Crossing Shine into slag once again. But Crossing Shine didn't give it a chance. When the red light ball gathered under the monster's neck, the black steel fist directly hit the monster's face. The light dissipated instantly. The gloves have switched to release mode. Bang. Before the monster could straighten its head again, Crossing Shine swung another heavy punch at its lower abdomen. The blue energy wave penetrated the monster's thick scales along the outer shell of the gloves and spread between its tightly bonded flesh and blood. What Yuzio didn't expect was that the monster, who was hit by 2 punches in a row, did not fall into a passive position. Instead, it raised the intact claw and grabbed Crossing Shine's head directly. The next second, Crossing Shine's right fist collided with the claw, forming a stalemate in the air. Yuzio had to sigh that, even though he was injured to this extent, the opponent's strength could still compete with Crossing Shine in overload mode. However, the monster only had this claw to use. Crossing Shine immediately grabbed the monster's injured forelimb with his other hand, and a silver metal chainsword emerged from Crossing Shine's damaged armor. Roar. Amid the monster's miserable roar, the silver metal chainsword drilled into the broken forelimb of the monster like a python hunting for food. Yuzio could feel that the monster was trying to break free with all its strength, and this call from the instinct for survival made the monster's power prevail again. Both of Crossing Shine's hands were shaking violently, and the entire body was even being dragged forward by the monster. Not even a little bit. Yuzio controlled the silver metal chainsword to move forward along the monster's forelimb, while using the sawtooth on the chainsword to crush the monster's flesh and blood, while trying to attack the monster's brain from the inside. This life and death tug-of-war ended with the monster raising its tail. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The monster shot out all the dozen spikes on its tail at once, and instantly pierced Crossing Shine's almost melted armor. The continuous impact not only made Crossing Shine fail in the confrontation, but also made him lose the opportunity to destroy the opponent's brain from the inside. But Crossing Shine still hooked the bones in the monster's forelimbs with the sword, and held the chainsword tightly with his hands, restricting the monster's movement. The severe pain made the monster more manic. The more it wanted to tear off the chainsword, the deeper the sharp teeth cut. Yuzio felt like he was playing tug-of-war with a mad bull. Even though he had used all his power to drag the chainsword, the body was still being pulled towards the monster. Crossing Shine's overload mode only had the last 7 seconds left. At the critical moment, the manuscript 03 driven by Beiying suddenly rushed out from the side of the monster and inserted 2 orange-red high-frequency hot swords into the lower abdomen of the monster that Crossing Shine had just attacked. Because Crossing Shine forcibly restricted the monster's movement with the chainsword, its thick tail could not reach the position of manuscript 03 and could only wave it randomly in the air. The monster, which had been forced into a desperate situation, was completely crazy. It didn't care about aiming at the weak point at all. It just instinctively kept tearing the armor of manuscript 03 with its remaining front claws. Every time the monster's claws hit, it would cause a violent impact and shock to the cockpit, where Beiying was. Beiying bit his teeth tightly, endured the pain caused by the broken ribs, and kept pushing the hot sword deeper into the monster's body. Warning, a violent energy reaction has been detected. Please avoid it immediately. At the same time as the system sounded the alarm, a red light appeared on the monster's abdomen again. However, this ball of light no longer went up along the monster's spine, but expanded rapidly in the original place. This is not a breath. Yuzao immediately understood the monster's intention. It was going to self-destruct. Perhaps because the high temperature had exceeded the monster's physical endurance limit, Xingshan's chainsword easily minced the monster's broken arm into meat paste. Die. At the critical moment, Heoji suddenly appeared and stabbed the sword from the back of the monster with all his strength. Unfortunately, due to the hero's one arm, only the blade of the slashing knife penetrated the monster's abdomen. Swish. The next moment, Crossing Shan wrapped the exposed blade with his chainsword and pulled it hard, pulling the entire slashing knife out of the monster's body. The red light was extinguished instantly, and the monster's roar also stopped abruptly. Overload mode has been turned off. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 62 Underground City. Module name, Heart of Lava. Module source, Kill unique target. Module description, a unique organ in the body of an unknown monster that can secrete a special liquid to stabilize violent energy reactions, especially for reactions that produce a lot of heat. Note, the stabilizing effect will not suppress the energy generated by the reaction itself, but will greatly increase the controllability of the reaction. Gulp. Crossing Shan dragged the huge corpse of the monster and stood on the giant platform that was slowly descending. This was one of the entrances to the Blackhorn underground industrial base. Due to the limited area of each platform, the 3 mechas could only enter into batches. There are a total of 12 such hidden entrances, which are evenly distributed in each district of Blackhorn City, but now only the XC district and the North district entrances are available. The 12 entrances are not all of uniform specifications. The smallest lifting platform only allows 1 mecha to pass through, and the largest can accommodate 5 mechas at the same time. As for the entrance to the XC district, where Crossing Shan is currently located, at most only 2 mechas can stand on it. So Sato decided to let Heoji and Manuscript 03, whose bodies were more seriously damaged, descend first, and Crossing Shan, who was still capable of fighting, stay on the ground and wait for the next round. Yuzao had no objection to this decision. Although they had eliminated the most threatening target in Blackhorn City, there were still many mutated level 3 monsters wandering around here. Once they attacked in groups, Heoji and Manuscript 03, who were seriously damaged, might not be able to escape unscathed. Fortunately, Crossing Shan was not attacked by monsters during the time he was waiting on the ground. We are about to enter the Blackhorn underground industrial base. The secondary verification procedure has been started. The system is scanning. When the cold synthetic sound of the system sounded, Yuzao noticed that spherical scanners were raised on the 4 corners of the lifting platform, just covering the entire platform with infrared rays. Identity confirmed successfully. Mecha code, Crossing Shan. Number, T001. Driver, none. Affiliated force, Zhu and Skankiang. At the same time, the closed wall in front of the lifting platform also disappeared, revealing the full picture of the Blackhorn underground industrial base. Is this really something that humans can build? Yuzao was so shocked that he let go of the hand holding the monster's corpse. According to Yuzao's visual observation, this huge underground hole has a vertical height of more than 1,500 meters. A huge underground building complex covering an area of more than 100 square kilometers is located in the center of the hole. Hundreds of light holes for ventilation are neatly and evenly distributed on the arched alloy dome. The orange skylight shines into the huge space at a 30-degree angle, like the sunset at the end of the world. In the center of all the buildings, a magnificent tower with a height of 600 meters stands here. The special double helix structure makes the whole tower look like 2 intertwined DNAs. Omega. Yuzao recognized the owner of this tower at a glance, because the Omega headquarters building located in Doland City is also in this shape. The transport platform has arrived, the bottom floor. As the system prompt sounded, the pressure relief port on the side of the lifting platform also sprayed a puff of white smoke. The entire platform completely stopped moving in a not so small shake. Crossing Shan. Beiying tiptoed and waved at Crossing Shan vigorously. What caught Yuzao's eyes were hundreds of people in different clothes with expectant eyes. When they saw Crossing Cheyenne land, everyone cheered immediately. "Look who's back!" the leader of the ground armed forces of the Black Sky shouted. "I was scared when you jumped off the transport ship, but I thought it must be okay if it was Crossing Cheyenne. I heard from Colonel Sato that the slashing knife originally belonged to the Ghost King, but I didn't expect it to be found by Crossing Cheyenne. It's Crossing Cheyenne. If it was another Mecha, we might have blown up the ship and the people." Yuzao listened to the praise of the crowd and waved to everyone. It's not that Yuzao didn't want to reply, but mainly because he had never been praised by a group of people at the same time in his previous life. If he hadn't become an expressionless Mecha now, he would have wanted to find a place to hide quickly. "Haha, this is the first time I've seen a Mecha so popular." Sato Yu, who was applauding along with everyone, couldn't help but sigh, and then he stood in front of the crowd and waved for everyone to be quiet. "The welcome ceremony is over. The crisis has not been resolved. Please return to your respective posts now. We will announce the next phase of the battle plan later." Hearing Sato Yu's order, the people present also consciously did not stay, waved goodbye to Crossing Cheyenne and quickly dispersed. "Before we set off, can you please take that guy with you?" Sato Yu pointed to the monster corpse next to Crossing Cheyenne. Of course. Yuzao certainly didn't mind such a simple task. "I really can't keep up with the times. In the words of your kind country, this should be called a man who has been away for 3 days should be treated with new eyes, right?" Sato Yu sighed while helping Beiying and Daozi open the back door of the jeep. After the two girls got in the car, he sat in the driver's seat. "As far as I know, except for the Red Hurricane of your Black Sky, the Hercules of the Golden Gate, and the Strider of the Immortal Golden Ring, no Mecha can pull a level 4 monster." "He can, and it's easier than the other 3 mechas." Beiying immediately replied. Yuzao wanted to tape Beiying's mouth shut now. "Haha, I see." Sato Yu laughed heartily and started the car. "Under normal circumstances, we only need to use a tugboat to put the monster on the transportation platform in the central city of Blackhorn City. That platform is directly connected to the monster research field. Emergency period, I know." Beiying nodded, then turned and pointed to the monster corpse dragged by Crossing Cheyenne. "But the corpse residue and beast blood are also all over the ground. What are you going to do with it?" Bang. "It's over. Forget about it. I'm sure those people from the Ministry of Health will nag me soon." Sato Ziyang slapped himself on the forehead. "Forget it. I guess they can't think of a better way, so let them nag." At this moment, Beiying suddenly felt someone poking her gently. She turned her head and found that Daozi was looking at her with a smile, holding a few milk candies and retro packaging in her hand. "Thank you." Beiying's cheeks were slightly red, and she gently took one from Daozi's hand and put it in her mouth. "By the way, why are you called Daozi?" Hearing Beiying's question, Daozi waved his petite hands and compared his head and body. Just when Beiying was wondering why Daozi didn't answer her directly, Sato Ziyang suddenly spoke. "Ask me if you have any questions." Daozi can't talk. Chapter 63 The Mystery of Life. After hearing Sato Ziyang's answer, Yuzao was also shocked along with Beiying. "Daozi, is she born like this?" Beiying suddenly felt that the milk sugar in his mouth melted a little too fast. "At least it has been like this since I met Daozi." Sato Ziyang's tone was not heavy, although Daozi can't speak, she is very likable. Hearing this, Daozi's 2 little hands hurriedly shook to deny. "Isn't she your daughter?" Beiying reached out and touched Daozi's soft black short hair. "What's wrong? Do you think she doesn't look like me?" Sato Ziyang suddenly laughed. "Just a joke. Daozi is indeed not my flesh and blood, but I raised her as my daughter." Daozi also nodded vigorously. "How old is Daozi this year?" "She looks only 13 or 14 years old." Beiying's expression gradually became serious. "If you have to say, she should be 14 years old." Sato Ziyang slowly put away his smile. "While let a 14-year-old child drive Mecha." Beiying bit the milk candy in his mouth. "I remember that the minimum standard for selecting pilots is also 18 years old, right? I see you have just reached adulthood, kid." "I'm 19 years old." Shirak was a little unhappy with the way Sato Yu addressed him. "You haven't answered my question yet. The situation in the 4th Islands is worse than you think. When the Razor Raid occurred, Crossing Cheyenne had not yet been created. Satoyu narrated calmly. After that attack, the three countries of Zori, Daokun and Yujin could no longer exist independently. Otherwise, why do you think our legion is called the United Front? Isn't this a reason to let Daozi go to the battlefield? Sherik firmly refuted the other party. Can't you find someone who can replace Daozi in the three countries? You are right. Hearing Satoyu's answer, Sherik's eyes widened on the spot. Those are three monsters, kid. Humans didn't have mechas available at that time. What do you think is our only way to fight monsters? There was no anger or sadness in Satoyu's tone, only emotion. Nuclear bombs. After hesitating for a moment, Sherik gave the answer. But I remember that none of your three countries have nuclear weapons, right? All three nuclear bombs were launched from the sea base of the Heian Kingdom. Satoyu replied. Before they launched the nuclear bombs, they only gave us 24 hours to evacuate. Beiyang didn't expect that the Razor raid that shocked the world 12 years ago actually hid so many unknown details. The media reports at that time were very vague, with words like most of the people have been evacuated safely, all monsters have been eliminated by nuclear weapons, and the World Council has formulated an assistance plan to help the three countries rebuild. Later, under the leadership of the World Council, Zori, Daokun and Yujin all secretly signed the Three Kingdoms Unification Act, but they still maintained their independent images on the surface. Satoyu smiled bitterly. Although this allowed our three countries to barely survive, the pollution caused by this nuclear strike also changed our physical constitution. In short, it is difficult for people who are contaminated to establish neural synchronization with the Mecha. Even if they can barely establish it, the synchronization rate is frighteningly low. Then Beiyang unconsciously grabbed the corner of his clothes. During that time, I happened to be studying in your country Kyan. So I avoided the worst pollution period. Sato continued. All the pilots of the joint front were mobilized from outside the Fourth Line Islands, but this would keep the three countries under the control of other countries. The permanent Mecha support of Heian is a good example, and Aozi is the only local pilot in the three countries who can pass the synchronization test. Squeak. When Sato finished speaking, the car just stopped in front of the huge double helix tower. She shouldn't have to endure this. Beiyang got up and walked out of the car, closing the door in a daze. Little boy, this world will not work the way we want. All we can do is adapt or struggle. Sato patted the hood of the car with his hand. Since there is no way to let Daozi escape the fate of becoming a pilot, then I might as well take her with me and let her drive the same Mecha with me. Looking at Sato's leisurely back, Beiyang didn't even know what to say. At this moment, Daozi suddenly grabbed Beiyang's hand and showed her an innocent smile. Beiyang didn't know whether Daozi could understand the conversation just now. She only knew that there was no grievance or sadness on Daozi's face. Then, Daozi took Beiyang's hand and followed Sato's Ayang's pace. Oh, by the way, you can't go through the main gate with your body size. There is an emergency transportation port on the west side of the monster research field. You can go in directly from there. Halfway through the walk, Sato's Ayang suddenly remembered that there was a big guy following him and hurriedly said to Xingshan, you can see it if you keep going left from here. Anyway, we will meet there. After waving to Xingshan, Sato's Ayang led the other two into the tower. Yuzio didn't speak all the way, but it didn't mean that he didn't hear the conversation between the two. In fact, he thought that Sato's Ayang even deliberately concealed or fabricated a lot of information about Daozi. According to Sato's Ayang, the nuclear strike had an impact on all the people in the fourth line of defense islands at that time. Why did Daozi become the one who could establish neural synchronization normally? Even if we don't pursue this matter, it is very suspicious that Daozi, who is only 14 years old, can normally drive a Mecha in the Legion now. Apart from people with great talents like Beiyang, normal reserve personnel should also undergo 2 years of systematic study in the pilot academy and pass the final test of the academy before they can graduate and become official pilots. As far as Yuzio knows, the reason why the selection of the pilot academy is to meet the minimum age of 18 is not only to meet humanitarian needs, but also because many training projects have very high requirements for physical and mental endurance. If Dowsy is 14 years old now, then she will only be 12 years old when she enters the pilot academy, and this is assuming that Dowsy will graduate this year. This can no longer be described as a genius. This is simply a Superman. It would be the most outrageous for a girl with so many doubts not to be caught by Omega for a search. But Yuzuru also knew that now was not the time to dig deeper into Dowsy's life experience, so he kept these questions in his heart and endured it all the way without daring to speak. Let's deal with the matter at hand first. Yuzuru forced his doubts to the back of his mind and walked to the west with the corpse of the monster. When crossing Cheyenne finally passed the high tower that blocked his view, he suddenly stopped because he saw a familiar figure in the monster research field. Red Hurricane. Chapter 64 Living Sample. Beiying? Are you kidding me? As soon as Satoyu led the two girls into the lobby on the first floor, Beiying saw two figures that were so familiar that they couldn't be more familiar. Hey, I was just saying where to find you. It seems that there is no need to waste this effort. Satoyu turned slightly and made way for Beiying, as if introducing a guest. Is this considered fellow villagers' meet? Eyes brimming with tears? Why is it you, a half-baked guy, who is here? Where are Brother Bing and the others? Meng Chanqing couldn't believe that he would see Beiying here. Could it be that Brother Bing is here too? Impossible. Then there will be no Mecha guarding the black sky. Be careful, Chanqing. Brother Meng Chanqing took over the right to speak in time. Beiying, did Brother Liu and Brother Zhang come with you this time? No, just like your brother said, they have to stay to guard the black sky, and our legion only sent me and Crossing Cheyenne to participate in the support this time. Although Beiying obviously still didn't get along well with Meng Chanqing, it was much better than before, when they would quarrel every time they met. What do you mean by you and Xingshan? Isn't it Xingshan that you are driving? Meng Chanqing choked in anger. You are talking as if two mechas have come. Can you transform into a mecha and Xingshan can move by himself? You are really a little prophet, just like the fortune teller I met in your country Khan before. Sato Xiang couldn't help laughing, but you are only half right. Huh. Meng Chanqing obviously didn't understand what Sato Xiang meant, and he found that even Daozi was laughing with him. I can't transform, but I have a new mecha. Beiying answered Meng Chanqing's question with a lot of evil taste. Xingshan can indeed move by himself. You guessed it right. Beiying's answer not only stunned Meng Chanqing on the spot, but also made Meng Chanqing, who was always a little serious, frown. Colonel Sato, you and Beiying are teaming up to make fun of us two brothers. Meng Chanqing didn't believe this absurd thing at all. Whether it's true or not, you can find out if you come with us. 5 minutes later, at the monster testing ground, Crossing Cheyenne had already placed the monster's body in the designated location, and the staff present focused their attention on Crossing Cheyenne. However, Yuzuru was already used to this kind of scene, so he simply looked at this so-called monster research field. This is a huge open-air facility covering an area of more than 5 square kilometers. The alloy high walls wrapped in blue isolation cloth divided into 5 areas of equal length and width. In the center of all areas is a huge building similar to the mechanical tree. These steel trees are more than 100 meters high and are composed of hundreds of plastic alloy cables of varying thicknesses. Every 20 meters of vertical height, there will be 3 leaf-shaped mobile horizontal workbenches extending from the trunk. Each workbench is exactly 60 degrees apart from each other and does not interfere with each other. With the mechanical tree, researchers do not need to build various temporary buildings around each monster body of different sizes like the construction team. This is what the future of mankind should look like. After Yuzuru looked around everything, he couldn't help but move his sight to the red hurricane leaning against the mechanical tree. When he first saw the red hurricane outside the field, Yuzuru didn't understand why Mecha appeared in the monster research field. It was not until Yuzuru walked into this area that he found that the armor of the red hurricane was full of brown tumors. This powerful 3rd generation mecha had been parasitized by monsters. But if you look closely, you can find that the creeping speed of these tumors has slowed down to the point where they move once every half a minute. Yuzuru believes that this is related to the broken blade that penetrated the power reactor of the red hurricane. So the monster has completely inherited the weakness of the mecha. As long as the power reactor can be destroyed, the parasitic monster will either die or be injured. Based on his previous experience fighting the Ghost King, Yuzao suspected that this phenomenon applies to all monster mechas. At this moment, Yuzao noticed 5 figures walking to the connection between the research field and the tower. "Why did you leave the Red Hurricane here?" Meng Chanking's tone suddenly became much more anxious when he saw his mecha. The disgusting tumor has not been cleaned up, and the broken blade is still stuck in the power reactor. Do you really treat it as a monster for research? This is the only living monster mecha sample at present. Of course, we must study it carefully. The one who responded to Meng Chanking was a young man wearing glasses. After saying this, he turned around and stretched out his hand to Sato Yu. "It's nice to see you again, Colonel Sato. Drive Mickey." Sato Yu shook hands with the other party in a friendly manner. "The new monster corpse has been brought to you. Do you have any other needs?" As for needs, Dr. Mickey adjusted his glasses and looked at the black giant behind him. "It's the first time I've seen a mecha that can move completely independently. Sorry, Dr. Mickey, I came here with Zhu and Skankian, not for you to study." Yuzao was the first to reject this excessive request before everyone else. "What the hell is that?" Meng Chanking was startled by Crossing Shine's words. Only then did he realize that this mecha, which was taller than the Red Hurricane, was the Crossing Shine whom he ridiculed as an old antique a few days ago. This is really incredible. Even Meng Chankong, who usually keeps his emotions to himself, had to marvel. It turns out that Crossing Shine is really conscious. I thought that you two, as Crossing Shine's comrades in arms, had already known about this, but it seems that it happened quite suddenly. Dr. Sanmu smiled, as if he was not surprised. During these days, when the fourth line of death and silence were cut off from the outside world, a lot of earth-shaking things must have happened. Drive Sanmu, please forgive me for being frank. I know that the current state of the Red Hurricane is very valuable for research, but no matter what, this mecha is also a combat unit of the Black Sky Legion. Meng Chankang quickly accepted the facts in front of him. Besides, we don't know the battle situation in other places yet. Every mecha is a valuable combat force. Please complete the research as soon as possible and return the mecha to us. Hearing Meng Chankang's words, Dr. Sanmu did not answer immediately, but turned his head and looked at the Red Hurricane thoughtfully. At this time, Meng Chanking was about to open his mouth to continue forcing, but was stopped by his brother. "The two pilots are right, Dr. Mickey." After a moment of silence, Sato Yu stepped forward to break the deadlock. "Red Hurricane is an indispensable force for us. Since Colonel Sato has said so, I will hurry up a little." Dr. Mickey reluctantly turned his eyes away from the Red Hurricane. "Tomorrow at noon, you will be able to see a fully intact Red Hurricane in the hangar." Chapter 65 Visual Blind Spot. When Yuzao followed everyone out of the monster testing ground, he could still feel the burning gaze from Dr. Mickey behind him. These guys from Omega are really hard to deal with. Yuzao felt scared when he thought of Yuan Zhen, who kept setting traps for him in the meeting. "Thank you, Colonel Sato, for helping us negotiate with Dr. Mickey just now." Meng Chankang expressed his gratitude to Sato Yu, who was walking in front of the team. His words came from the heart. After all, no matter how deep the conflict between Omega and the Mobile Llama Corps was, Dr. Mickey and Sato Yu were in the same trench. "What's there to thank? You are our comrades who have come from afar to support us. It's unreasonable to hold back the mecha just because you are doing research." Sato Yu was very open-minded. "But don't hate Dr. Mickey. He is a person who is easy to devote himself to research. His eyes light up when he sees something new. But he is very popular with children in private. I have never heard of anyone skipping his class. He is also a teacher. I thought that Omega's group of workaholics would not do anything else except research." Seeing Sato Yu's good attitude, Meng Chanking simply said what was in his mind. Of course, when he said this, he was stabbed by his brother Meng Chankang. "You are right. It is precisely because of their enthusiasm for research that the Watcher Alliance can survive to this day." Sato Yu smiled slightly. "They are also human beings with 7 emotions and 6 desires, but compared to you and me, they choose to burn their precious youth and energy on science." Meng Chanking realized that what he said just now was indeed a bit too much. Don't be fooled by the sloppy look of some researchers. They work just like us who tie our heads to our waists. They eat whatever they can get by and don't sleep if they don't have time. When they finally have some free time, they are too tired to go out. Satoru said very naturally, as if he had also worked in Omega. As far as I know, Dr. Mickey only sleeps 4 hours a day. He said that this is related to his physique, so he has time to teach the children in his spare time. I took it for granted. It turns out that Dr. Mickey has that side. Meng Changqing apologized tactfully. It's okay. You have only been in contact with him for a short time. It's normal to have such thoughts. Satoru obviously didn't take it to heart. It's difficult to make an accurate judgment if you don't really understand something. Colonel Sato seems to know the culture of Khan country very well, and his speaking habits are also very similar to ours. Meng Changqing seized the opportunity to change the subject. Hahaha, is that so? I studied at your Khan country's military academy for 5 years. Maybe I was influenced by you. Sato Xiang smiled knowingly. After all, many of our things come from Khan country. Although I'm an officer, I'm very interested in culture. Unknowingly, everyone had walked all the way to the transfer station. I can't accompany the two little brothers back to the dormitory. You go back and have a good rest. Report to the combat center on time at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. Sato Xiang smiled and spread his hands. We will arrive on time, Colonel Sato. Meng Changqing agreed. I will take Crossing Cheyenne to the hangar first. After all, he can rest there. Sato Xiang turned his eyes to Beiying. It happened suddenly. Accommodation for your army is not a trivial matter. You go home with Daozi first, and I will take you there after the room is arranged. Yeah. Beiying had no objection, and Daozi beside her seemed very happy. Then, let's say goodbye here first. As Sato Xiang said this, the other two groups took trains heading in different directions. You don't seem to like talking much. Only Satoru and Crossing Cheyenne were left in the huge transfer station, but the latter obviously couldn't take the train, so Satoru could only take Crossing Cheyenne to the transport station to get a car and drive it by himself. I'm still learning how to better integrate into your conversation. Yuzio chose a statement that seemed more reasonable. So you are artificial intelligence? Satoru was very curious, to be honest. I didn't believe that you were a self-aware Mecha at first. I always wondered if General Chen and Yan Fei were still in your cockpit. General Chen and Yan Fei are the two pilots I admire most. Yuzio did not answer the question about artificial intelligence. That's really a coincidence. I think so too. Satoru was obviously not entangled in this. At that time, you were the first Mecha to come out, and everyone was guessing who would become the first group of pilots. To be honest, I also participated in the selection at that time, but the final result was still a little lower than your first generation of drivers. Does Kyango's Mecha also allow other people to participate in the selection? Yuzio always thought that the first pilot was pre-selected. Although we belong to different countries, strictly speaking, both you and I are members of the Watcher Alliance, so as long as we are members of the Watcher Alliance, we have the right to participate in the selection of pilots. But you are right to think so. Once I become your pilot, I will become a member of the Black Sky Legion. Although all the major legions are under the command of the Alliance, the country where each legion is located also has management rights. As long as it does not conflict with the orders of the Alliance, our legions usually obey the will of the country. Of course, there is also an implicit rule that everyone knows, that is, the Mecha jointly developed by each country and Omega must have a pilot who is a native of the country. At this point, Satoru's tone was obviously much more serious. So Daozi will become a pilot. Yuzio easily came to the conclusion. Well, it seems that you are indeed thinking about our conversation. Satoru nodded slightly. At the same time, one person and one machine have arrived at the pickup point. Satoru skillfully unlocked and started a military vehicle and then signaled Crossing Cheyenne to follow him. By the way, can I ask you something? Before stepping on the accelerator, Satoru looked back at Crossing Cheyenne. If I knew. Yuzio felt that the other party's question might be quite sensitive. Why does Beiying's Mecha only need one person to drive it? When Daozi took the key tied around her neck from her clothes, Beiying suddenly thought of a very old TV series. It seemed that only people 40 years ago would use keys. Since Beiying was born, all the doors she has seen have been electronically locked for anti-theft. but Dowsy seemed to be quite accustomed to this. She skillfully inserted the key into the keyhole and twisted the door handle with her other hand. Click. As soon as the door opened, a few beams of sunset hit Beiying and Dowsy's faces. That is, Beiying could hardly believe what she saw. A room full of plants. Chapter 66 Natural Miracles. Thank you. When Beiying was still immersed in the lush greenery, Dowsy had already opened the shoe cabinet with some paint peeling off, took out a pair of dark blue rubber slippers from it, and placed them at Beiying's feet. But when Beiying noticed that Dowsy was only wearing a pair of socks and stepping on the metal floor, she knew that the slippers were specially prepared for guests. After hesitating for a moment, Beiying shook her hand embarrassedly and followed Dowsy's example of wearing socks and stepping on the floor directly. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. She didn't want Dowsy and Sato Ziyang to accommodate her in all aspects. Seeing that Beiying was still a little reserved, Dowsy became more enthusiastic. After putting the slippers back in place neatly, she pulled Beiying into the somewhat narrow living room. I don't know if it's because of the limited space, the furniture in the entire living room, in addition to an L-shaped open kitchen and a refrigerator, there is only a tea table that is so low that you have to kneel to use it normally. Induction cooker, microwave oven, sink, all kitchen appliances are squeezed on a countertop less than 5 meters long. Beiying can even imagine how troublesome it would be to cook. The refrigerator is also an old single-door model. Its size can be called mini. According to Beiying's estimation, even if the refrigerator is filled to the brim, its storage capacity will not exceed one person's 3-day supply. The only thing that surprised Beiying was that there were 17 pots of plants of different sizes placed in this cramped space, and some were soaked in water and some were planted in the soil. Since Beiying was born, she has only seen plants in textbooks and historical documentaries. Occasionally, she saw real plants in museums and imitation natural gardens in wealthy areas. Since humans completed the fourth technological revolution 40 years ago, natural plants have gradually changed from land burdens in the previous expansion era to luxury goods in the current restricted era. A seed of an endangered plant that has lost its vitality is enough to be sold at a sky-high price of tens of millions at an auction, not to mention a green plant that has already taken root and sprouted. But what puzzled Beiying even more was how these plants could grow to such a degree without any protection. After the fourth technological revolution changed the ecological environment of the entire planet, 95% of the plants became extinct on a large scale because they could not adapt to the new environment. The remaining 5% could not survive in the open air. Compared with having a seed, it is more difficult to build an environment where the seed can take root and sprout. It can be said that the money needed to buy an active seed is not even 1/10 of the cost of building a natural garden. That's why Beiying was so surprised when she saw these plants. Dingling. A crisp bell rang, pulling Beiying's thoughts back to reality. She looked up and found that it was Dowsy holding a copper bell in his hand. Seeing that Beiying was no longer in a daze, Dowsy brought the 2 cups of tea he had just brewed to the tea table and then knelt down obediently opposite Beiying. Is this tea? Waves of steam came out of the cup in front of Beiying, and a green tent leaf floated on the transparent water and spun slowly. Dowsy nodded vigorously, and her big blue eyes seemed to be asking Beiying, isn't this tea? Beiying raised her eyebrows slightly, and looked in the direction where Dowsy had been busy in the kitchen, and suddenly found that 2 leaves were missing from a green plant there. Beiying held the hot teacup in both hands, and for a moment she didn't know whether to drink it or not. Dowsy seemed very calm. She widened her eyes as if to demonstrate, blew away the hot air on the teacup with her mouth in front of Beiying, and took a sip gently. So Beiying could only pick up the teacup obediently, and took a sip with courage. The taste was not as strange as imagined, and even had a very strange fragrance. But when he thought that every sip of such a cup of tea was worth 1,000 gold, Beiying always felt like he was drinking money. However, looking around the small and shabby apartment, such an environment would have been considered bad even decades ago. Beiying once lived in a renovated relief house in Zhenhe City. Except that it was a little dirtier than this room. The other facilities and conditions were even more comprehensive. Suddenly, Dowsy seemed to have forgotten something important, and almost burned himself when he handed the teacup to his mouth. Then, Beiying saw Daozi hurriedly stand up and bow his head to apologize to him, then immediately rushed to the refrigerator and took out a paper bag from it. Daozi held the paper bag with both hands, closed the refrigerator door with his back, and then carried the paper bag to the kitchen counter. Gulp. Several red fruits rolled out of the paper bag, and one of them almost fell to the ground, but fortunately Daozi caught it in time. When the petite Daozi brought a plate of neatly cut fruits, Beiying immediately recognized this thing that looked exactly like the one in the textbook. If Beiying remembered correctly, during the expansion period, apples were the first fruit to disappear from the public eye. Later, humans still found a way to preserve the seeds of natural apple trees, but these seeds could no longer adapt to the planet's environment, so people could only cultivate new varieties through artificial intervention. It was a new type of fruit tree with a very short growth cycle, which could be harvested 12 times a year, and the yield had increased more than tenfold. The apples produced by this fruit tree will not grow worms, the flesh is firm, and the juice is full, except that they are only half the size of a fist and the black color is not very pleasing. Other aspects are not much different from apples. Later, people also created a series of flavors such as watermelon flavored apples, strawberry flavored apples and grape flavored apples through genetic adjustment. So much so that Beiying once thought that there was only one type of fruit left in the world, the new apple. Later, she learned from history books that, although most of the remaining fruits also retained seeds, they were very unsuccessful in genetic modification, and putting them into production would only cost more than they earned, so humans kept using new apples to replicate the taste of other fruits. The plate of apples in front of Beiying was obviously not a new era variety. Is this an apple? Daozi nodded. Can you show me a complete one? Beiying hadn't been so excited for a long time. The obedient Daozi immediately got up and took out another apple from the paper bag in the refrigerator. After washing it with water in the sink, he wiped it dry with a paper towel and finally handed it to Beiying. This is a real apple, a real apple. Beiying looked at the red fruit in her hand carefully, as if she was holding a precious work of art. Now Beiying felt that Daozi was showing her a miracle. If she could learn from Daozi how to grow these plants and get a few seeds, then the financial difficulties of Zhu and Skankian could be easily solved. Chapter 67 Putting the Cart Before the Horse. Daozi, can you tell me how you grow these plants? Beiying's eyes were full of expectation, and his hands were rubbing on the apple. Daozi obviously didn't expect Beiying to ask such a question. She pointed her finger to her mouth in confusion, as if to express, are you sure you want to ask me? Ah, sorry. Beiying realized that she had made a stupid mistake and quickly handed her mobile phone to Daozi. You can type and tell me. Daozi took the mobile phone that Beiying stuffed into her with some confusion, nervously clicked on the screen a few times, and then shook her head at Beiying aggrievedly. Can't tell? Beiying's mood suddenly became a little disappointed, but such a secret that can easily create a lot of wealth is usually not easy to let others know. Beiying regretted that she was impulsive for a moment, and she forgot to avoid suspicion because Daozi was still a child and asked such a serious question. But Daozi did not nod to confirm, but shook her head and hurriedly returned the phone to Beiying. Isn't it that you can't tell? Beiying took her mobile phone, and she realized that Daozi had not written anything. Click. Just as Beiying and Daozi were getting anxious, the old door made a sound. Hey, what are you two doing? Sato Zion casually threw the coat on his shoulders into his room, then quickly washed his hands in the sink, and sat cross-legged next to Daozi with expectation. Why didn't you eat the fruit? Did it go bad? Sato Zion asked, while picking up a piece of cut apple and putting it in his mouth. Well, it's not bad. At this moment, Sato Zion noticed that Beiying was holding a whole fist-sized apple in her hand. Ah, do you like to eat it whole? Then Daozi and I will prepare dinner. You eat first. Sato Zion thought that Beiying felt that eating a whole apple would damage the image of a lady, and that he came back at the wrong time, so he immediately prepared to pull Daozi to make dinner. No, Colonel Sato. Beiying saw that the other party had misunderstood, so he decided to tell the truth. I have never seen this kind of apple before, and I was a little excited at the moment, so I didn't eat it. Is that so? Do you think these apples are very precious, and it would be a pity to eat them? Sato Zyang sat down with relief after hearing this and took another apple and stuffed it into his mouth. By the way, you can call me uncle in private, but if you feel embarrassed, just call me Mr. Sato. I clearly told you not to call me Colonel, but you still keep calling me Colonel. Colonel. I think it's a pity to eat it. Beiying still hasn't taken a bite of the apple in her hand. So you plan to keep it, take it back and worship it, or sell it for a good price? Sato Zyang looked at Beiying with interest and fed Daozi a piece of apple by the way. But when the war is over, the apples will probably be rotten and you have to find a container to put it in. Sato Zyang's words stumped Beiying because she didn't know what to do with the apple in her hand. If you treat these things as commodities, then I can't help you. The only person who can grow these plants is Daozi. I don't know the method. Satakshan wiped his mouth with a tissue with satisfaction, leaving only a piece of apple for Beiying. You can ask Daozi, but I'm not interested in these either. I just want something to eat. But Daozi didn't answer me. Seeing that Satakshan had said so much, Beiying confessed her thoughts. I really want to know how to grow these plants, so that we can relieve the financial pressure of our army. How did you ask Daozi? Satakshan raised his eyebrows slightly, as if he was expecting something. I wanted Daozi to write it down. Beiying pointed to his mobile phone, but Daozi returned it to me without writing anything. Hearing Beiying's words, Daozi's face suddenly turned red, and she shook her hands and shook her head, as if to express that Beiying had misunderstood her meaning. PFFT, ha ha ha. Satakshan couldn't help laughing. So you were doing this when I walked in? Beiying looked at Satakshan laughing and couldn't help but pinch the corner of her clothes, but she was embarrassed to say anything. Daozi seemed even more anxious than Beiying. She kept grabbing Satakshan's arm and shaking him, and even patted Satakshan twice. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I'm not laughing at you being rejected by Daozi. You used the wrong method. Satakshan finally laughed heartily. You see, Daozi is so anxious now because she wants to tell you that she didn't reject you. Using the wrong method? Beiying let go of the hand that was holding the corner of his clothes. It's not a big deal, but Daozi doesn't like me to tell others. Satakshan touched Daozi's soft black hair, and the latter lowered his head and hid his face behind Satakshan. Could it be that Daozi can't write? Beiying vaguely guessed the answer. Look, that's not what I said. Sato Zyang turned around and patted Daozi. Daozi has never been to school, but she is very smart. She follows others to learn every day and can recognize the meaning of most words. However, she definitely can't write it. If you ask her to, she can only write her own name at most. So that's how it is. Beiying was relieved to hear Sato Zyang's answer. If Daozi is willing, you just need to follow Daozi to learn it once. Sato Zyang's expression seemed quite relaxed. At this moment, Daozi suddenly came out from behind Sato Zyang with a red face, shook his shoulders vigorously, and then pointed to the clock on the wall. It's 6 o'clock. It's time to go out. Sato Zyang turned around and looked at Beiying. If you don't mind, run an errand for Daozi on my behalf today. No problem. What is it? Since Daozi was willing to teach her such an important thing, Beiying certainly had no reason to refuse Sato Zyang's request. At the end of every month, we send some food to our neighbors. After all, Daozi and I can't eat so much, so why not share the food and let everyone have a taste? You're not sending apples? Beiying felt that her spirit was greatly shocked. Correct. Sato Zyang admired Beiying's shock, as if he had expected it. Since you agreed, let's get going now. It's time. Before Beiying could react, Daozi jumped out of the refrigerator and took the paper bag, motioning Beiying to follow him. Okay. Beiying barely suppressed his inner surprise, took the paper bag from Daozi, and walked out the door with Daozi. Little kid. Before leaving the house, Sato Zyang suddenly called Beiying. I have a message for you. Please say it. Although Beiying didn't like Sato Zyang's address to her, she knew that he had no ill intentions. Sato Zyang slowly walked to the door and said in a tone unique to elders, apples are for eating. Chapter 68 Heirloom. Thank you, little girl, and our most lovely Daozi. An old lady in a gray sweater took the apple and gently touched Daozi's head with her weathered hands. You're welcome, Grandma. You should also take care of your health. Beiying thanked the old lady according to the scenes in the film and television works in his memory, but his smile didn't seem natural. Haha, little girl, you are also from that army, right? There haven't been outsiders here for a long time. The old lady was happy and excited. Are you going to stay here permanently? In my opinion, you should live with our Dowsy, so that you can take care of each other. How great. Hearing what the old lady said, Dowsy's face flushed instantly, and Beiying didn't know whether to tell the old lady that he was just a passerby. Satoyu is a man after all. He is still single at his age. How can he take good care of Dowsy? The old woman didn't care about Dowsy and Beiying. She just kept talking. The people who live here are all old bones like me who can't run. Those who have children are all little ones. They can't play with Dowsy. How can this work? Dowsy was so anxious that he waved his hands as if to deny the mother-in-law's statement. Alas, if my boy was still here, maybe the child would be as big as Dowsy, the old woman said, and her hand unconsciously touched Dowsy's face. Oh, look at me, an old woman, nagging. Okay, you two go and share the apples. Before leaving, Beiying glimpsed the old woman's bedside table through the crack of the door. There stood a photo of 5 people wrapped in a frame, and half an oxidized apple. After saying goodbye to the old woman, Beiying followed Dowsy and knocked on doors in the apartment building, constantly delivering apples from the paper bag to these elderly people or elderly couples living alone. The whole process lasted only an hour and a half, because there were only 23 households in the entire apartment building. If each family had not pulled them to talk for a while, Beiying estimated that the whole process would not even take half an hour. But in this magnificent underground building complex, there are hundreds of apartment buildings like this. It is hard for Beiying to imagine how many people who could not escape with the large group were left here. Are they all elderly people and children? Crunch. As soon as Beiying and Dowsy entered the door, a strong fragrance floated into their noses. Hey, you're back. Are you hungry? Sato Xiang turned around and smiled at the two of them when he heard the door open. Is it curry? Beiying sniffed with her nose and suddenly felt that the smell was somewhat similar to the fast food she had bought at a convenience store. If you answer correctly, you will get an extra can of meat as a reward. Satoyu joked as he opened the can with one hand and poured the food in the can into the pot. Although Beiying didn't know if this was a treat, she was not a picky eater, so she accepted the other party's way of cooking canned food. But Dowsy obviously didn't think so. Dowsy put away the paper bag, pushed Satoyu out of the kitchen directly, and quickly moved the pot away from the induction cooker. The whole set of coherent actions almost expressed what the hell are you doing? Beiying, who saw this scene, finally realized that she shouldn't have any expectations of Satoyu's cooking skills. The chef in this family was Dowsy, who was only 14 years old. Dowsy looked at the brown stew bubbling in the pot angrily and couldn't help showing an angry and reproachful expression to Satoyu. The tall Satoyu raised his hands in surrender and sat obediently at the far side of the tea table. I used to like this brand of curry, and I haven't eaten it for a long time. This was the best solution that Beiying had racked her brains to come up with. She didn't want to bother Dowsy to make an extra meal. But Dowsy still shook her head firmly. She poured the stewed curry in the pot into a clean large bowl and set it aside. Then she put the stew pot into the crowded sink and turned on the faucet. Using this time, Dowsy put on the apron hanging on the wall and tied the two ties behind her into a cute bow. Then, Dowsy performed a standard curry recipe in front of Beiying. Cut the washed radish and potatoes into pieces, chop the onions, put a large spoonful of salad oil in the stew pot, stir fry the onions for 30 seconds, then add the chopped radish and potatoes, and stir fry for 3 minutes, add a little water, and cook over medium-low heat for 15 minutes. At the same time, cut the beef into thumb-sized pieces, sprinkle a little salt on it, and stir fry it in another frying pan until it changes color. Then put it in the stew pot. When the time is up, then pour half a liter of water into the stew pot, boil it over high heat, skim off the foam, add the curry cubes, and simmer for 30 minutes over medium-low heat. These steps may not seem complicated, but it is difficult to cook this meal efficiently on a crowded countertop, filled with all kinds of bottles, jars, and kitchen utensils. However, Dowsy can methodically interweave various steps while stewing the dishes and clean the countertops cleanly during the final waiting time, which is an amazing skill in itself. After less than an hour of waiting, 3 plates of fragrant curry beef rice were finally served by Dowsy. Delicious. Although the curry cubes used were the convenience store curry cubes that Baeing was familiar with, the sweetness of the vegetables was not covered by the curry flavor, and the beef was just cooked. Not only did it not feel dry when you bite it, but you could also taste a little fat. Sure enough, you have to eat the curry made by Dowsy. Sato Zion wolfed down 2 big mouthfuls and gave Dowsy a thumbs up. But Dowsy didn't appreciate it. Instead, he pointed at the big bowl that had been wrapped in plastic wrap and then pointed at Sato Yu. Do you want me to finish the canned curry by myself for the next few meals? Sato Yu's smile collapsed on the spot. I'm afraid you'll be hungry, so I'm in a hurry to make you a meal first. Listening to Sato Yu's explanation, Dowsy shook her head. She was determined that Sato Yu would eat up the dark dish by himself. After the 3 of them enjoyed the delicious meal made by Dowsy, Sato Yu took the initiative to take care of all the dishes and chopsticks. Dowsy mysteriously took out a book with a sense of age, a guide to flower planting for beginners, from a locked storage box, and stuffed it into Baeing's hand. So you grow plants according to the process in this book. Baeing looked at this book published before the 4th technological revolution with some disbelief, because she had never heard of the author and publisher of this book. Moreover, these books are not ancient scriptures. The planetary environment decades ago was still very suitable for plant growth. Baeing did not believe that the methods in the book could be used to grow plants in modern times. As if he understood Baeing's questioning expression, Dowsy took the initiative to turn the book to the page about fertilization and care, and pointed to a picture in the book. Whether you can find the right soil or not, as long as you drip Jindra liquid flower fertilizer once every 2 weeks after the seeds are planted, your plants will thrive in any environment. Just looking at the bottle of old-fashioned green liquid in the picture, Baeing felt that his IQ was being rubbed to the ground. This book is probably a brochure from an unscrupulous flower fertilizer manufacturer in the old days. However, just when Baeing was about to explain to Dowsy that this was typical nonsense, Dowsy directly took out something that shocked Baeing even more. A bottle of green liquid. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 69, The Truth on the Other Side. You used this thing and followed the instructions in the book to grow all the plants alive. When the facts were placed in front of Baeing, even the most absurd theories seemed so convincing. Dowsy nodded very seriously. Baeing felt that her worldview had collapsed a little, because in her opinion, this behavior was no different from performing a ritual on plants, but Dowsy grew the plants alive in this way. However, Baeing quickly regained her sanity. She roughly flipped through the entire book and found that the content of the book was basically normal except for the part with embedded advertisements. Then the problem obviously lies in this bottle of green liquid that looks very magical. Dowsy, where did you find this Kindra liquid flower fertilizer? Do you have any stock? Baeing decided to find out. But to Baeing's surprise, Dowsy actually shook his head. No stock? Baeing realized that he asked too many questions in one breath. Dowsy shook his head to deny it, pointed to the bottle in his hand, and then pointed to the Kindra advertisement picture in the book, and then waved his hand. You mean, the liquid fertilizer in your hand is not Kindra? Baeing felt that she was gradually able to follow Dowsy's thinking. Dowsy's brows instantly relaxed and nodded vigorously. Can you show it to me? Baeing also breathed a sigh of relief. Now she finally felt that her worldview was saved. After taking the bottle from Dowsy, Baeing widened her red pupils and slowly rotated the bottle, while carefully observing the appearance of the green liquid. If you look closely, there is indeed a difference in the green between the two. The color of your bottle is brighter. I don't know why, but I always feel very familiar. Beiying only felt familiar for a while, but couldn't remember what it was specifically. So you think this thing is very similar to the color of Kindra, so you use it as Kindra. This time Dowsy not only nodded, but also smiled happily. Perhaps it was because Beiying could understand Dowsy's thoughts. That's really coincidence. Where did you find it? Beiying suspected that this was not something that humans could create decades ago, otherwise the genetic modification of plants would not have been delayed until after the fourth technological revolution. This time, Beiying did not wait for Dowsy to nod or shake his head to answer, and directly projected a three-dimensional holographic map with his mobile phone. However, Dowsy did not point out the direction on the map with his hand, but ran out of the room to look for something in the locker in the living room. Half a minute later, Dowsy walked in front of Beiying with a sewing box and a bottle half filled with water. Just when Beiying was wondering what Dowsy wanted to do, Dowsy suddenly opened the sewing box, took out the thinnest needle, and stabbed it directly into his index finger. The bright red blood dripped into the water along Dowsy's petite fingers, turning into countless free silk threads that spread disorderly. The next second, the originally bright red blood suddenly turned into emerald green and quickly spread in the bottle. The light smile on Beiying's face slowly disappeared, but Dowsy's innocent sky blue eyes still looked at Beiying's red pupils expectantly. At 8:27 in the evening, the Black Point Underground Industrial Base, the War Factory hangar. Hundreds of people in black and white uniforms were repairing the severely damaged Manuscript 03. In contrast, only dozens of people were repairing the Hero, which was the farthest from crossing Cheyenne. The reason for this situation was that the Hero itself was a conventional Mecha, and the United Front was a local legion. The Black Point Industrial Base would not be able to replace spare parts, and even if it built a Hero, it would probably take less than a few days. But experimental mechas like Manuscript 03 are very laborious. Not only are there no ready-made spare parts, but even the raw materials for making parts are rare. Almost every Manuscript 03 repair part transported into the hangar was packed in a large sealed box, which made Yuzao wonder if this group of people were repairing a nuclear weapon that needed to be kept secret. It would be great if Manuscript 03 could repair itself like you. Dr. Miki, who was standing on the platform on Crossing Cheyenne's shoulder, seemed to have noticed Yuzao's thoughts. Self-repair also requires materials. Yuzao turned around and aimed his oppressive red eye at Dr. Miki. He knew very well that Dr. Miki was eager to dismantle Crossing Cheyenne right away for a search. 2 hours ago, when the people from the War Factory and Omega were moving a lot of parts in a hurry to repair Crossing Cheyenne, Yuzao directly used a body fusion in front of everyone. From the time Crossing Cheyenne assimilated the parts to the completion of the repair, the whole process took less than a minute. Hundreds of people were stunned. They wanted to use this repair opportunity to collect some data about Crossing Cheyenne's body, and it would be best if they could do system testing for Crossing Cheyenne. As a result, Crossing Cheyenne didn't need manual repair at all. So in the end, only Dr. Miki was left to talk to Crossing Cheyenne. It's hard to imagine where the power you use comes from. If this power can be popularized to other mechas, then the monsters will not be scary. Dr. Miki did not hide his desire and curiosity about Crossing Cheyenne. Dong dong. My power comes from here, and perhaps the real reason for my awakening also comes from here. Crossing Cheyenne knocked on the power reactor wrapped in a solid shell with his hand. Unfortunately, I don't know what the nature of this power is. I don't understand it. I only know that I can drive it. Isn't this the fascinating part of science? Especially when you have seen the future. Keep trying to get close to it and touch it. Dr. Miki's tone was very excited. I respect your independent will, Iron Pilot Crossing Cheyenne, but I still hope to unlock the secrets of your body one day. A person who is crazy about science, but knows how to measure. This is Yuzao's current judgment of Dr. Miki. Drive Miki, you don't seem to be very interested in Manuscript 03. Yuzao decided to change the subject, and the question raised by Sato Xiang has been hovering in his mind: why can Manuscript 03 be driven by one person? At that time, Yuzao hadn't thought about how to answer this question, and Sato Xiang laughed and said that he was just asking casually. Is it so obvious? Dr. Miki pushed his glasses with a smile and shifted his gaze to Manuscript 03, but there's nothing to hide about this kind of thing. You said before that you've met Dr. Yuanzen, right? Yes. Although Yuzairo's tone was calm, his heart was already in turmoil. Why are all the secrets related to this woman? Question mark. She is my mentor. Hearing this, the brightness of Crossing Shine's one eye increased by a level. Although I did not participate in the design of this mecha, the teacher always mentioned it to me. She said that manuscript 03 carries all the hopes of Omega. Dr. Mickey narrowed his eyes slightly, as if the mecha in front of him was Yuanzen himself. She has told me all I can know, and the rest of the knowledge is not within my scope. But now that we can see her on the battlefield, I guess we are not far from the truth. Chapter 70 Dreams and Reality. Beiying couldn't fall asleep. In this huge underground city, artificial lights replaced the moonlight and became the only light source that would not make people feel lonely at night. For the reason of saving energy, the lights here were not very bright at night when the whole city fell into a deep sleep. Except for those facilities that needed to operate all night, most of the buildings were in a kind of blur. Two ambiguous pale yellow lights shone on the ceiling, but Beiying did not choose to get up and close the gap in the curtains, but lay quietly on the bed, injecting these two lights. As if it was premeditated, when Satoyu handed the key of the temporary dormitory to Beiying, it was already very late outside. So she naturally stayed at the request of this father and daughter and slept with Daozi. At this moment, Daozi, who was sleeping soundly, was hugging Beiying's arm and resting his head comfortably on Beiying's shoulder. Beiying didn't know what to do. Although she had noticed something was wrong, when Sato told her about Daozi's life story, she was still shocked when she saw Daozi's blood turn into emerald green. Did Sato know about this? The answer must be yes, and it is even possible that Sato deliberately let her see all this. Maybe this is just the tip of the iceberg of Daozi's secrets. Does Daozi know that she is different from ordinary people? Beiying can't be sure. Although Daozi is naive, naivety and stupidity are not the same. From all aspects, Daozi is definitely sensible and smart among her peers. If she has more differences from others, Daozi will definitely be able to detect it with her mind. How do people around her view Daozi? Sato treats Daozi as a daughter, and so do the elders. And from the mouths of the elders, we can learn that the children like Daozi very much and call her gentle sister. As for the Legion, Beiying has not found anyone who will point fingers at Daozi, and the same is true for Omega. Regardless of whether these people know the abnormality of Daozi, in their eyes, Daozi is no different from a normal person. Thinking of this, the figure of Crossing Shine could not help but appear in Beiying's mind. The situation faced by this mecha that has awakened its self-awareness is more complicated than Daozi. Although the secret of Crossing Shine has not been solved, this does not prevent everyone in the Black Sky from treating Crossing Shine as a comrade in arms. Maybe the Crossing Shine in our eyes is the Daozi in their eyes. Beiying suddenly felt that the stone in her heart was put down, and sleepiness gradually surged into her heart. She turned her head to look at the sleeping Daozi, and gently lifted the other's black hair behind her ears with her hand. At this moment, Beiying decided to keep the secret of Daozi in her heart forever. Wake up, Beiying. Beiying suddenly opened her eyes, and cold sweat wet her back. Because the one who woke her up was not someone else, but Crossing Shine. This mecha that still had some kind of connection with her actually broke into her dream directly and told her to wake up quickly. According to common sense, even if Crossing Shine appeared in Beiying's dream, he was just a part of the dream. But Beiying didn't think so. Crossing Shine appeared in front of Beiying by tearing open the space. The moment Beiying saw Crossing Shine, the thought of "I'm dreaming" immediately appeared in her mind. Then, the vague dream suddenly became extremely clear. All the incomplete details and illogical things were infinitely magnified in Beiying's pupils, directly allowing her to get out of the dream created by her subconscious mind in a sober state. But when Beiying sat up from the bed, she could no longer hear any voice from Crossing Shine. Something must have happened. Beiying believed that she was not just having a nightmare, but had really received a warning from Crossing Shine. So she jumped off the bed immediately and changed her clothes as quickly as possible. At the same time, Daozi, who was awakened by Beiying, was rubbing his sleepy eyes that had not yet fully opened and looked at Beiying's actions in confusion. Daozi, put on your clothes. Something happened. Beiyang reminded Daozi loudly while putting his shirt on his body from the neck. Daozi was stunned for a second when he heard the word accident. Then he jumped off the bed and dressed with Beiyang. In less than 30 seconds, Beiyang rushed out of the room with Daozi. After knocking on Satakshan's door and telling him the destination, the two of them ran to the hangar first. That was where Xingshan was in Beiyang's dream. The flickering street lights quickly retreated in Beiyang's sight. With every step forward, Beiyang's sweat would fall on the cold road. The next second, Beiyang saw a scene that she would never forget in her life. In the silence, a bright fire rushed up to the dome from the direction of the hangar, lighting up the silent city under the night sky. But all this was like a silent movie playing on the screen, without any sound. Xingshan, reply quickly if you hear it. Beiyang reached out and pressed the headset, but the only response to her was a chaotic noise. Damn it. 10 minutes ago. Communication connection failed. Reason, unknown interference raw. Crossing Shine clenched his fists and crossed them in front of him to block the heavy punch of the red hurricane. The next second, the collision of the two steel giants set off a violent wave of air. The bent parking rack, the broken alloy wall, the bursting electric sparks, the scattered parts pile. Although Crossing Shine had tried his best to subdue the opponent with close combat, the entire hangar was still turned upside down by the two mechas, and it was a mess. Not long ago, two Mecha-specific SBMT hydraulic vehicles carrying the Red Hurricane drove into the war factory and stopped in a hangar 500 meters away from Crossing Shine. At that time, Yuzao was still sighing at Omega's high efficiency. It took only half a day to complete the monster stripping. However, no one expected that just 2 minutes later, a hostile target with energy level 4 suddenly popped up in Crossing Shine's energy radar. Almost at the moment when the red dot appeared, Yuzao heard the sound of electromagnetic guns firing from the hangar next door. The entire war factory suddenly entered a first level alert state, and all the lights turned into a dazzling red. But that was all. The broadcast and the alarm didn't even have time to sound, and a shockwave that only Yuzao could see swept the entire underground city. All electronic equipment was out of control. Xingshan's communication channels were also all interfered with. What's more terrifying is that in order to prevent the noise from production at night from affecting the masses, the war factory also specially installed 16 anti-vibration waveform silencers on the periphery of the factory, completely eliminating the possibility of sound transmission. Not only that, the war factory also installed optical barriers, so that when doing certain large-scale optical experiments, it would not affect other places. When other electronic equipment failed, only these two devices continued to operate miraculously. And now, the only one who can stop the Red Hurricane in the war factory is Xingshan. Chapter 71 Flagship Mecha. At that time, Yuzao could only think of 3 ways to deliver the message. First, go to the periphery of the factory at full speed and destroy the silencer. But once Crossing Shine did this, he would let the Red Hurricane act at will. Second, create a sound that the silencer could not cover up, or a light that was enough to break through the optical barrier. This was completely impossible for Yuzao, because the equipment module on Crossing Shine could not create such an exaggerated movement. If he had to do this, he could only destroy the large energy facilities in the war factory to cause a movement that was enough to break through the silencer and barrier. But the energy facilities are the core of the war factory. Once destroyed, it means that the entire factory will be shut down for a long time to come. Third, try to use the synesthesia residue established with Beiyang before to warn the other party. This is the method with the lowest success rate, because this kind of thing rooted in the subconscious is often suppressed by reason when awake, unless Beiyang's brain activity frequency is very low now. Even if a connection is established through this method, Yuzao must make Beiyang believe that this is not an illusion or dream created by the subconscious, otherwise Beiyang will only treat his words as fart. However, this was the most time-saving and least expensive method that Yuzao could think of, so Yuzao took a gamble and successfully entered Beiyang's dream in the image of Crossing Shine, but he only said 4 words and was kicked out by Beiyang's subconscious. He didn't have a second chance. Yuzao could only hope that Beiyang was sharp enough to detect the crisis he conveyed. It will be too late if we don't move. With the idea of minimizing the damage, Crossing Cheyenne ran towards the red dot on the energy radar. Beep. Just as Beiying and Owzy were running desperately, a rough-lined old-time off-road vehicle suddenly rushed out from behind and drifted in front of the two. Get in the car. Sato Yu, who was wearing an old leather jacket, waved to the two. Boom. After closing the car door, Sato Yu stepped on the accelerator to the bottom, and the gasoline engine instantly burst into a huge roar. How do you have an old-time off-road vehicle? Beiying, who was sitting in the passenger seat, held the armrest above the car window tightly with one hand and quickly buckled the seatbelt into the slot with the other hand. Because I'm a fucking person from the old times, Sato Yu shouted, afraid that his voice would be covered by the engine. I've long felt that the fourth technological revolution is unreliable. How can everything be driven by electricity? What if there's no electricity? It's not that there's no electricity, it's a malfunction. Beiying was also forced to raise his voice. All electronic equipment has been interfered with. They're all the same. Sato Yu suddenly slapped himself after saying this. Why am I fucking swearing again? Damn it. I finally got Owzy to supervise me to quit. The speeding off-road vehicle turned one intersection after another, constantly approaching the hangar. I shouldn't have sold the horn last year. Sato Yu was about to curse, but his eyes caught Owzy's anxious expression in the rearview mirror, so he held back the swear words. Many people should have seen the fire just now. Even if someone didn't see it, they would have woken up someone who was aware of the situation. Beiying's mind was still replaying that silent film. Wake up, they don't have gasoline cars to use, they can only run. Sato Zion turned the steering wheel sharply. But how did you know there was danger? Crossing Cheyenne. I dreamed of Crossing Cheyenne, he told me. Beiying did not hide it. I know this sounds suspicious, but Crossing Cheyenne, and I once forced to disconnect the neural synchronization, and since then I have had a very weak induction with him. I can't imagine how you can synchronize the neural network with a conscious Mecha. And how can you be sure that this is induction, not residual ghost synchronization? I can't explain that feeling to you. Beiying was stunned for a long time and couldn't find a suitable description. You will know after you synchronize with him once. Forget it. But I have a very serious question to ask you. Under Sato Zion's speeding, the war factory has appeared in the field of vision of the three people. Ask. Beiying saw that Sato Zion was slow to speak, and his heart was as anxious as a cat scratching. Sato Zion frowned and looked at Beiying several times before speaking. Your Mech is a nuclear electric hybrid, right? Will the electronic interference affect your Mech's startup? Warning, missiles are coming. 9 golden crowfish missiles spread out in the air, turning into 27 macro-locked missiles, flying towards different joints of Crossing Cheyenne. Bang, bang, bang. Continuous flames exploded on Crossing Cheyenne's body, and damage warnings popped up like dominoes one after another in front of Yuzo's eyes. If Crossing Cheyenne was facing other specialized third-generation mechas, he might not be so embarrassed. But as the flagship mech of the Black Sky Legion, the Red Hurricane can almost be regarded as the top combat power of the Khan Kingdom. Mecha code, Red Hurricane, model, flagship third-generation mecha, drivers, Mengchang King, mecha performance, third-generation variable frequency nuclear power hybrid armor, height 85 meters, weight 15,600 tons equipment. Module, Beizero 2.0 holographic intelligence system, anti-biological/anti-metal Jinwu fission missile matrix, Thunder turbo electric acceleration charging fist, Taiya combined hot cutting sword, Fengli enhanced electromagnetic energy cannon, combat rating, seal level, 6900 points. Yuzo rescanned the body data of the Red Hurricane, and now he finally understood why Mengchang King was so domineering. Under the premise that Crossing Cheyenne does not activate the hardening skill, any equipment module of the Red Hurricane can pose a threat to Crossing Cheyenne. When Kyango and Omega jointly designed this mecha, they had already listed other mechas as potential enemies. So the Red Hurricane is not only the nightmare of monsters, but even mechas can only be prey in front of him. Long-term vision, comprehensive consideration, the consistent style of Kyan country. Even when facing the red hurricane controlled by the monster, Yuzao had to sigh at the terrifying strength of this mecha. According to Dr. Mecha, if it were not for protecting the ground troops at that time, the red hurricane would never have been attacked by the monster and parasitized. But the fully powered red hurricane pulled out the two hot swords hidden under the back armor, and the scorching heat instantly distorted the air around the sword. Looking at this powerful mecha in front of him, Yuzao couldn't help but smile bitterly in his heart. Before, he had always adhered to the idea of minimizing the damage to the war factory and preserving the integrity of the red hurricane mecha, so he suppressed Crossing Shine's strength. But now it seems that everything is unnecessary. Then let's get serious. The power furnace on Crossing Shine's chest suddenly turned red. Chapter 72 Hunting Time. The two mechas rushed towards each other almost at the same time. Xingshan's giant axe had been completely damaged in the previous battle, and now he could only rely on his gloves to fight the opponent head-on. Yuzao's goal was very clear, that is, to drag the opponent into close combat at all costs, so as to make the equipment module of Red Hurricane useless. Just before the two mechas were about to enter the opponent's attack range, Red Hurricane suddenly put the two swords in his hands together. The sharp saw teeth bit each other tightly, and they were tightly stitched together, instantly turning into a giant longsword with balanced offense and defense. The next second, while Xingshan's huge steel foot stepped on the ground to make a shallow pit, this hot sword stabbed straight at him. Oops. Xingshan, who did not expect the opponent's sudden change of tactics, could only use the most brutal means to block the stab. Xingshan stopped forcibly and grabbed the sword with both hands wearing gloves, while the body leaned back. Swoosh. The teeth that rotated like a chainsaw kept biting the armor on the outside of the gloves, and the metal melted by the high temperature splashed in the air along with the sparks. Crossing Shine had almost transferred all the power to his hands, but the sword that was enough to pierce the air was still moving forward. Harden. At the moment, when Yuzao activated the skill, the sharp sword finally stopped in the air 5 meters away from Crossing Shine's power reactor. Despite this, the teeth stuck and the gloves still tried to continue to rotate. Raw. This unexpected obstruction made the monster parasitic in the body of the Red Hurricane even more angry. It let out a creepy roar through the body's broadcasting device, while greatly increasing the power of the mecha and constantly pushing forward with the long sword. Creak. After a tooth-grinding sound, the sword covered by the high temperature suddenly moved forward 2 meters. Target locked. At this moment, the armor on Crossing Shine's abdomen suddenly deformed, revealing 8 heavy machine guns. In Yuzao's system vision, the 8 blue aiming circles have overlapped on the power reactor of the Red Hurricane. Fire. Bang, bang, bang. 8 pitch black gun muzzles simultaneously spurted out red flames, and the stationary ammunition chain suddenly pushed the metallic bullets into the barrel like a conveyor belt running at full speed. Countless shells with white smoke fell on the ground like raindrops, making a crisp sound. Although the Chenglan guerrilla turret group is not a weapon used to deal with mechas, and the bullets fired have no additional armor-piercing effect on metals, when the dense firepower is all concentrated in the same area, the kinetic impact caused by the bullets can still pose an effective threat to mechas. In less than 2 seconds, the offense and defense of the two mechas were reversed. Crossing Shine held the hot sword tightly, not allowing the Red Hurricane to easily pull out the hot sword. At the same time, the armor on the chest of the Red Hurricane had obvious dents and cracks, and I was afraid that it would be completely penetrated in a few seconds. Raw. Just when Crossing Shine's hardening time was about to reach its limit, the roaring Red Hurricane suddenly loosened his hands holding the sword. Yuzao had already thought of this situation. Crossing Shine stabilized his body at the moment when the opponent let go of his hand and threw the hot sword behind him without hesitation and rushed directly in the direction of the Red Hurricane's retreat. But he was still a step late. Crossing Shine ran less than 2 steps, and the retreating Red Hurricane raised his right hand towards Crossing Shine. The huge iron fist decomposed layer by layer, and the 5 fingers were divided into 5 rotating accelerator needles like petals, revealing the blue muzzle at the wrist connection. The chaotic electric current quickly gathered under the rapidly rotating ring stabilization device. The whole process was like forcing the disorderly scattered electric energy into a cage. You have been locked. Bang. A blue tail fin armor-piercing shell directly penetrated Crossing Shine's shoulder at 5 times the speed of sound, leaving a ballistic trajectory visible to the naked eye in the air. Warning, the shoulder armor has been damaged, and the bone joints are damaged by 76%. As the system alarm sounded, Crossing Shine's huge body also retreated several steps backward under the exaggerated kinetic energy impact. With just one strike, Yuzao almost lost the feeling of his right arm. What's worse is that, even if the Red Hurricane's wind and thunder enhanced electromagnetic energy cannon cannot fire continuously, it has already distanced itself from Yuzao. Yuzao knew very well that he was about to face the bombardment from the Red Hurricane. Dynamic calibration mode is on. Calculating. Warning. Missiles are coming. The Red Hurricane didn't even want to give Yuzao a chance to breathe. Fire. Yuzao didn't even have time to wait for the system to complete the calculation, and directly controlled the gorilla turret to aim at the missile that had just flown out of the launch hole. Boom. Before the 5 golden crowfish missiles had time to decompose, they were hit by Crossing Shine's machine gun in midair and exploded into fireworks. But the other 4 missiles also completed the splitting at this time, turning into 12 firebirds flying along an arc towards Crossing Shine's power reactor. In a hurry, Crossing Shine could only raise his left arm, which he could still control, to block his chest. Warning, 63% of the left arm armor was damaged. Crossing Shine couldn't withstand the next round of volleys. A silver metal chainsword emerged from Xingshan's right shoulder, wrapping around the nearly broken mechanical skeleton layer by layer. Yuzao regained control of the paralyzed right arm in this way. Compared to before, the reaction and movement speed of Xingshan's right arm would be greatly reduced, and his fingers could not be controlled. In this case, whether it was long-range shooting or close-range combat, Xingshan had completely lost his advantage. In a flash, Xingshan directly picked up the Taiya combination hot sword behind him and ran towards the deeper part of the factory at full speed. But, amid the strange roar, the backup energy of the Red Hurricane has also been activated, which means that it will gain a huge power beyond the normal state. Crazy growing muscle tissue drilled out from the gaps in the armor and wrapped around the limbs of the Red Hurricane like vines. The waist and back of this red giant gradually bent, and the whole body seemed to have degenerated into a terrifying human-like beast. Click. With the crisp sound of metal breaking, a crack suddenly appeared on the chin of the Red Hurricane that spread to the back of the head. Immediately afterwards, the Red Hurricane had an extra mouth and 2 rows of twisted fangs. Roar. This time, the scream that echoed throughout the factory could no longer be heard with any electrical noise, only the beast's roar that made people's hair stand on end. Boom. 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 Although Yuzao hadn't seen the Red Hurricane in his sight, the exaggerated running sound was getting louder and louder in his ears. On the energy radar, a dazzling red dot was approaching him at a speed that Yuzao couldn't imagine. Almost. Although the pressure from the rear had almost stopped Yuzao's brain, he still didn't slow down. The next moment, a huge building appeared in front of Crossing Shine. He remembered that Dr. Sanmu said that all the equipment for mechas and ground forces were stored here. War Armory. Chapter 73 Synchronization Failure. Bang. When the Red Hurricane on all fours saw Crossing Shine in his sight, the latter just used Harden to forcefully knock open the door of the War Armory. Roar. The frantic Red Hurricane jumped towards the breach created by Crossing Shine without hesitation and jumped into the War Armory. However, when the Red Hurricane saw Crossing Shine again, the opponent was no longer the seriously injured Mecha. Crossing Shine's paralyzed right hand was completely covered with black fluid. This thing that looked like a living thing seemed to be reshaping Crossing Shine's damaged wound. Realizing that something was wrong, the Red Hurricane immediately unfolded the launch matrix on his chest and launched a new round of missile attacks on Crossing Shine. At the same time, 2 honeycomb launchers that the Red Hurricane had never seen before suddenly appeared behind Crossing Shine. Boom. Both sides opened fire almost at the same time. But what the Red Hurricane didn't expect was that Crossing Shine did not launch a missile, but a heat decoy bomb. When the 9 golden crowfish missiles were divided into 27 macro missiles, they were greeted by a full 100 scurrying heat source targets. Blazing flames rose in the armory, and no missiles hit Crossing Shine. Overload mode has been activated. While the explosion was not completely over, the power reactor on Crossing Shine's chest turned blood red and rushed into the flames at the fastest speed. The next second, a black mecha raised a hot sword and slashed at the red hurricane. Roar. Amid the screams of the red hurricane, the red sword edge cut through the muscle tissue wrapped in the outer layer of the body and embedded directly into its armor. In order to avoid being attacked by the electromagnetic energy cannon again, Yuzio also specially adjusted the attack angle so that the red hurricane could only defend with the arm that could be transformed into an electromagnetic energy cannon. Give him what he wants. The high-speed rotating saw teeth were constantly cutting the bones of the red hurricane's body, and the green animal blood and golden sparks bloomed warmly in the air. At this moment, Yuzio suddenly noticed that the other hand of the red hurricane was accumulating power. Then, the red hurricane suddenly exerted its strength and swung out a full-speed thunder turbo-electric acceleration punch, hitting Xingshan's waist armor. Warning, waist armor damaged by 46%. The huge impact force directly shook Xingshan's body backwards, and the red hurricane also got rid of the hot sword stuck in his arm. However, due to the rebound effect of the black armor, a huge crack appeared on the hand armor of the red hurricane. But this could not stop the red hurricane from continuing to attack. I saw this mecha that was no different from a beast leap high and smashed Xingshan with two huge fists raised above its head. Boom. When the two fists that fell from the sky landed on the hot Taiya sword, the floor under Xingshan's feet sank several meters. A circle of airwaves that was enough to lift small vehicles immediately broke out from the location of the two mechas. Yuzio could even feel the violent shaking of this armory. The previous blow had already reached Crossing Shine's endurance limit. If the opponent's strength was a little stronger, Crossing Shine's Lingayu elastic muscle unit would burst on the spot. What was even more troublesome for him was that the monster parasitic in the red hurricane's body did not seem to have shown any other abilities. It only slightly strengthened the red hurricane, and Crossing Shine had suffered a lot. Swish. After Crossing Shine barely blocked this attack, the red hurricane immediately took his hands away and kicked Crossing Shine's torso in an extremely uncoordinated posture. Warning, chest armor damaged by 45%. Crossing Shine, who had no time to resist, immediately stepped back several steps. Every blow from the red hurricane was enough to kill Crossing Shine, so much so that Yuzio didn't even know when to use Harden to resist. Before Crossing Shine adjusted his center of gravity, the red hurricane's fists were charged again and rushed directly towards Crossing Shine. Click. After two punches, the Taiya hot sword in Crossing Shine's hand completely collapsed, turning into countless fragments that were still warm and fell to the ground. Next, Yuzio only had one option left, which was to activate the whole body hardening. Where are you looking? Suddenly, 4 burning heavy artillery burst on the back of the red hurricane, burning all the flesh and blood of the monster that overflowed from the armor. When the red hurricane roared and turned around, the hero holding the purple slashing knife was already standing at the hole at the door of the armory. In the hangar, Beiying climbed the maintenance passage for a full 10 minutes before finally stopping. With the elevator out of service, this was her only way to reach the cockpit of Manuscript 03. At this moment, the white mecha, which had been repaired by 90%, was quietly leaning against the parking rack. Because it had not been completely repaired, the cockpit opening at the head of the mecha was not closed. Beiying gritted her teeth, tried to restrain her body that was about to lose strength, and descended along the artificial ladder all the way to complete this last section of the journey. When Beiying stood at the control position of Manuscript 03, her body was shaking so much that it was difficult to even buckle the fastener. Looking at the gray and white control interface in front of her, Beiying slowly picked up the synchronization helmet that belonged to the Manuscript 03 driver. She didn't know what would happen after she put on the helmet. If she couldn't establish neural synchronization with Manuscript 03, she could only pray that Crossing Shine and Heioji could stop the rampaging red hurricane. But if she could establish neural synchronization, no one could guarantee that the out-of-control Manuscript 03 would not cause her to fall into consciousness deviation, and the worst case, she would be brain dead. Listening to the loud noises coming from the armory in the distance, Beiying silently closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and put on the helmet. She wanted to hold her fate in her own hands. Identity authentication started. Identification information. Beiying. Authentication passed. Abnormal body parameters detected. Current calibration deviation. 17%. Suggestion. Give up synchronization. Second confirmation. Do you want to continue to establish synchronization? Neural synchronization is being established. Pulse signal docking failed. Warning. Current calibration deviation. 33%. Please disconnect from the outside immediately. Warning. Current calibration deviation. 58%. Please disconnect from the outside immediately. Warning, 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 warning. The warning from the system was like a train heading off into the distance, getting farther and farther away from Beiying's ears. At this moment, Beiying's brain suddenly felt an intense pain, and it felt as if someone was hitting her head with a sledgehammer. Boom, boom, boom. Amid Beiying's painful screams, a blinding white light suddenly changed everything around her. The incandescent light that was so bright that it was blinding, the isolation tank that was so solid that it was hopeless, and the transparent liquid that was enough to suffocate Beiying. Before her vision was about to blur, Beiying stretched out her delicate little hand like a child's and grabbed the glass that was as thick as a wall. A man with a blurry figure kept slapping the indestructible container and seemed to be shouting something loudly. Just as Beiying's consciousness was about to dissipate, she used up her last bit of strength and heard the two words from the other person's mouth. Beans. Chapter 74 Manuscript 03. Beiying suddenly realized that he was not simply experiencing a shift in consciousness. If it was just a shift in consciousness, then Beiying would only encounter two situations. First, Beiying would fall into his chasing the rabbit again. For Beiying, the possibility of encountering this situation is very small, because the lingering knot in his heart has long been untied by Beiying. Second, Beiying's nerve perception will be misplaced. This situation is no safer than chasing the rabbit, and usually occurs when the neural synchronization is not fully established. The command issued by the driver's brain cannot correspond to the correct part of the body. For example, Beiying wants to raise his left hand at this time, but the final result is that the right hand moves. Although it doesn't sound very dangerous, once encountering this situation that violates human common sense, the driver's brain will immediately produce a stress response, causing a series of abnormal physiological indicators: increased blood sugar, increased blood pressure, poor breathing, accelerated heart rate, etc. Not only that, the driver's spirit will also be greatly oppressed, and symptoms such as anxiety, mania, and fear will appear. Under the dual torture of the body and mind, the driver is likely to enter chasing the rabbit without any preparation when he is in a coma, or directly suffer from vasodilation shock, leading to life-threatening. However, Beiying's current situation does not match either of the two. After ruling out these two situations, a piercing chill immediately surged from Beiying's heart. She thought of the situation when Crossing Cheyenne lost control in the black sky, and she forced herself to establish neural synchronization with Crossing Cheyenne. The bright incandescent light, the isolation tank that was so solid that it was hopeless, and the transparent liquid that was enough to suffocate Beiying. These were not scenes that Beiying had ever experienced. What she was entering now was not her own memory at all. This was chasing bunnies of Manuscript 03. Tick. The moment Beiying had this thought, her consciousness suddenly broke away from the body that did not belong to her. Even so, Beiying did not change back to her own appearance as she did in Crossing Cheyenne's chasing bunnies at that time. At this moment, Beiying did not even know what image she was watching this memory with. She was like a ball of invisible air, or a camera mounted in the room, overlooking everything happening in front of her. The most critical question is, what exactly is Beiying synchronizing with neurally? If the situation of Manuscript 03 is the same as that of Crossing Cheyenne, then why does this Mecha need a driver instead of acting alone? Moreover, during the time that Beiying was driving Manuscript 03, she had never encountered the same situation as when driving Crossing Cheyenne. The movements were out of control, the synchronization rate fluctuated, and even forced to shut down. Since Beiying took control of Manuscript 03. Her synchronization rate with this Mecha has been maintained at a high level of 95%. Except for the system forcing the synchronization rate to be reduced. When the Mecha was damaged, Beiying did not find any accidents during the normal driving stage. This can't be the memory of a normal person. The human subconscious will perfectly record many things and scenes that have been subjectively forgotten, and chasing the bunny is to reproduce the most unforgettable memory in the subconscious. This means that everything presented by chasing the bunny will be extremely close to reality. If the person who is trapped in it is not sober enough, this person may completely lose the ability to distinguish between reality and dreams, and be lost in this memory forever. But what did Beiying see? The space was so narrow that it could only be described as cramped. The figures were so blurred that only blocks of color could be seen, and the endless slapping and shouting. This didn't look like a memory at all, not even a dream. Looking down on all this, only the suffocating feeling in the isolation tank that was enough to make people despair, and the cold liquid that occasionally emitted a string of bubbles, seemed like something that would exist in the real world. Beiying couldn't imagine what significance this monotonous and pale scene had for Manuscript 03, so much so that she and Manuscript 03 were trapped here, watching the endless loop of the picture. No, I must be able to do something. Beiying desperately thought about where the breakthrough point would be. First of all, she had to accept the fact that this simple scene was the most unforgettable memory of Manuscript 03. After putting aside all irrelevant issues, Beiying could temporarily determine that the person in the isolation tank might be Manuscript 03. Secondly, in this scene, the only variables that could be called Manuscript 03 were Manuscript 03 himself, the man who was slapping the isolation tank, but couldn't see his face clearly, and the several unrecognizable figures behind the man. It can be seen that Manuscript 03 has never really seen the appearance of several people in reality. Perhaps it is for this reason that Beiying has not been able to have a fixed image. Manuscript 03 does not know what Beiying looks like at all. Finally, and most importantly, as a neural synchronization object, Beiying can communicate with people who are trapped in chasing bunnies, but the effect depends on whether the other party's subconscious mind has a strong exclusivity. Moreover, although Beiying cannot change the world created by Manuscript 03, she can change her image in this world. Dong. Dong dong. Dong dong dong. Beiying looked at the man who was hitting the glass and had a plan in her mind. Manuscript 03 no longer remembers why she appeared here. Everything that happened in front of her seemed to have been repeated many times, but Manuscript 03 could not be sure that this feeling was right. Who is the person who hit the glass? Did he make the sound? Why can everyone make sounds with their mouths? After one familiar question after another popped up, Manuscript 03 subconsciously put her petite hand on the place where the man hit the glass. Manuscript 03 couldn't see the man's face, nor the people behind him. Was it really that he couldn't see clearly, or was it that he simply couldn't recognize them? In Manuscript 03's eyes, everyone was the same as the figure that always floated on the glass. He could see, but couldn't touch. Boom. 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 The man's mouth opened and closed, constantly shouting a name that Manuscript 03 couldn't understand. Manuscript 03 opened his eyes wide with curiosity, trying to imitate the man's lip movements, but Manuscript 03, immersed in liquid, couldn't make any sound. In a trance, Manuscript 03 always felt as if he had tried the same behavior hundreds of times, and all of this would be forgotten by himself at a certain point. The stronger this feeling was, the more Manuscript 03 wanted to remember the man's face and what he said. Over and over again, Manuscript 03 kept imitating the man's opening and closing lips, trying to carve those two words into his chaotic mind. Beans. Just when Manuscript 03 remembered this short sentence completely, the moment of forgetfulness and the premonition also came at the same time. But this time, the cycle was broken. A thin figure appeared beside the man. Although she seemed so out of tune with everything around her, Manuscript 03's heart almost jumped out of his chest the moment he saw her. When the petite hand was placed where Manuscript 03 was, the small space suddenly began to vibrate. Manuscript 03 watched the girl slowly overlap with the shadow in the glass and finally merged into one. The two identical girls looked at each other and said each other's names in unison. Beans. Neural synchronization established successfully. Current synchronization rate 99%. Protocol override successful. Second mode unlocked. Chapter 75 Illegal Intrusion. Be careful. When Crossing Cheyenne shouted this, the silver metal chainsword had already jumped out from under his right arm armor. Bang! A blue light flew past Heyoji's power reactor and left a bullet hole several meters in diameter on his chest. Heyoji, who was hit hard, hit the high wall behind him on the spot and then half knelt on the ground, covering the terrifying hole in his chest. Warning, chest armor is damaged by 46%. The power reactor conveyor is damaged, and the current power is 21% lower than the standard value. If Crossing Cheyenne hadn't used the chainsword to wrap around the arm of the Red Hurricane at the last moment and interfered with the launch angle, I'm afraid Heyoji would have been beaten into a pile of scrap metal by the electromagnetic cannon. Are you okay, Dowsy? Sato Zion looked anxiously at Dowsy, who was gasping for breath beside him. Although the neural synchronization protection was turned on at the first time, the exaggerated flight speed of the tailfin armor-piercing projectile still caused a brief residual pain to the two. But Dowsy just pinched his own flesh hard, then stood up again, and nodded to Sato Zion to indicate that he was fine. Roar. The Red Hurricane, who had lost his grip, let out an angry roar, and directly grasped the chainsword wrapped around his arm with his hand, that had turned back into a giant fist. The next second, Yuzao felt an overwhelming force coming from the other end of the chainsword. Even though Crossing Cheyenne, who had turned on the overload mode, had grabbed the chainsword with both hands, his huge body was still uncontrollably dragged towards the Red Hurricane. Crunch. Crossing Cheyenne's giant feet rubbed out a string of dazzling sparks on the ground. What kind of power is this? When Yuzao had this thought, Crossing Cheyenne completely lost his balance and stumbled to the position of the Red Hurricane. What greeted Crossing Cheyenne was the fully charged Thunder Turbo Electric Acceleration Charging Fist. Hardened. Yuzao generously expanded the skill effect to the entire body. Boom. A shockwave exploded at Xingshan's head, and with the sound of impact that resounded throughout the building, Xingshan's body fell backwards on the spot. Although the armor on the Red Hurricane's fist was also damaged by the rebound damage, it still did not intend to stop. Just when Yuzao thought that he would fall directly to the ground, the Red Hurricane suddenly grabbed the chainsword and pulled Xingshan's unbalanced body up. But this time, the Red Hurricane's fist hit nothing. The moment Xingshan was pulled back by the huge force, he had already lowered his posture and directly hit the Red Hurricane's waist in a wrestler-like posture. Bang. After a loud bang, the Red Hurricane, which failed to react in the first time, immediately fell into a disadvantage, and the entire body of the fuselage retreated madly under Xingshan's continuous advancement. At the same time, Heyoji also stood up again, drew the purple slashing knife on the ground, and slashed straight at the back of the Red Hurricane. With a flash of the knife, the back armor of the Red Hurricane cracked on the spot. Green beast blood gushed out from the disintegrating metal debris like a spring, and the erosion from the extermination biological toxin slashing sword caused the monster's flesh and blood hidden under the armor to quickly decay. Opportunity. After feeling the power of the Red Hurricane weakening, Crossing Cheyenne immediately straightened his body and retracted the silver metal chainsword. The gloves have switched to release mode, while the Red Hurricane is still restrained by the toxin. Crossing Cheyenne decided to use the last remaining overload time to output at full power. One punch. The vibrating energy pulse penetrated into the Red Hurricane's abdominal armor with the impact of the gloves and directly shattered the auxiliary muscle units in the Red Hurricane's body. Two punches. The overflowing energy rampaged through the Red Hurricane's torso, and countless mechanical components fell off its bones. Three punches. The rampant shockwave destroyed the missile matrix structure on the Red Hurricane's chest, and also cut off the line between the fire control device and the power furnace. The last blow. Crossing Cheyenne accumulated all the remaining energy in his gloves and his right fist, and then swung it at the shell of the power reactor of the Red Hurricane. Boom. The already cracked armor shattered on the spot, and Crossing Cheyenne's giant fist completely destroyed the turbine device of the Red Hurricane with overwhelming force. As the red hurricane screamed, a huge shockwave spread from crossing Shine's fist, and even the hero standing behind the red hurricane couldn't help but take 2 steps back. However, looking at the sunken torso of the red hurricane, Yuzao was only terrified. Because the system did not pop up a kill prompt. Almost at the moment, when Crossing Shine was about to make another punch, 8 tentacles with a sea blue glow suddenly emerged from the withered flesh on the back of the red hurricane. At this time, Yuzao had no time to think about other problems. He had only one idea in his mind. That was to smash this fist down. Gulp. Crossing Cheyenne had just raised his fist, and a ball of slurry comparable to the color of a blue fire jellyfish suddenly spit out from the mouth of the red hurricane and sprayed on Crossing Cheyenne's head. Warning, the power load exceeds the threshold. The overload mode has been turned off. Instantly, a current of up to 1 million volts spread throughout Xingshan's body from head to toe, detonating all the capacitor units inside the body. Dazzling electric sparks burst through the gaps in Xingshan's armor, and the red hurricane also swung its battle-scarred giant fist at this time. Immediately afterwards, Xingshan's chin was completely shattered by an uppercut, and the entire mecha fell to the ground. On the other side, Satoyu and Aozi quickly retreated the moment they saw the tentacles extend, and escaped from the direct attack range of the tentacles. But this did not stop the red hurricane's attack. The 8 sea blue tentacles suddenly stopped dancing, and all pointed in the direction of Heioji like a stretched whip. The next moment, the brightness of the tentacles suddenly increased to the point where they could not be seen directly with the naked eye. 8 leaping currents shot out from the ends of the tentacles and directly hit Heioji, who was still moving. Bang bang bang. After the violent shaking, and more than a dozen explosions, only flames, electric lights, and countless system warning pop-ups remained in Satoyu's eyes. Serious damage to the body is detected. Please use the escape pod to exit the mecha immediately. With just one blow, the red hurricane completely deprived Heioji of his combat capability. Yuzao watched the red hurricane slowly approaching him unwillingly, but Crossing Shine, who had lost his capacitor unit, was like a useless man with broken bones all over his body. Not to mention stopping the attack of the red hurricane, it was even difficult to stand up from the ground again. I should have thought of it earlier. Yuzao only now realized that the red hurricane's power beyond the limit did not come from the nuclear power reactor, but from the extra electricity generated by the parasitic monster. This is the ability of this monster. Roar. The red hurricane roared as it stopped in front of the fallen Crossing Shine. The wildly growing muscle tissue filled the damaged part of the red hurricane's body, making this originally majestic mecha deformed and hideous. Just when Yuzao was ready to scrap it, 8 swimming tentacles suddenly drilled into Crossing Shine's torso. Warning, unknown intrusion signal detected. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.